moments, in our public moments, in our decision making. Allahumma ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. As you know, we have, alhamdulillah, made a goal for ourselves tonight to finish from Surah Al-Qari'ah all the way to Surah An-Nas. Quite a few surah to finish, inshallah ta'ala, or complete. So this is expected, inshallah, to be an introduction to the surah. There's so much that can be said, as you can imagine, but hopefully this will be getting us excited, inshallah, to go back to these surah and to appreciate them in depth at a later time, inshallah. So today we're going to be receiving the keys, inshallah, through which we're able to access the surah, understand the context a bit more, but it is expected that we go back, reopen them, relive them, re-experience them. So we begin, inshallah, with Surah Al-Qari'ah, reciting and then discussing and analyzing together, inshallah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم القارعة ما القارعة وما أدراك ما القارعة يوم يكون الناس كالفراش المبثوث وتكون الجبال كالعهن المنفوش فأما من ثقلت موازينه فهو في عيشة راضية وأما من خفت موازينه فأمه هاوية وما أدراك ما هي نار حامية بسم الله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. By the way, the notes for all these surah should be, inshallah, updated by Saturday, by the next Saturday, inshallah. So do keep an eye on the group. You'll have access to all of the notes in details. It's a lot to read and go through, but inshallah, take your time and enjoy. Let's begin. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in the first ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions Al-Qari'ah. And Al-Qari'ah is one of the names of the Day of Judgment. There are a lot of names in the Quran for the Day of Judgment. We have, for example, Al-Tamma, we have Al-Sakha, we have Al-Haqqa, and each name captures a specific reality or a specific component of the Day of Resurrection. Al-Haqqa, for example, captures the fact that this is reality, that it's real. It's not just an imagination. You know, sometimes you imagine things to get your kids to be scared. You come up with something, a story of some kind, a fable. You tell them about, the Loch Ness Monster, or you tell them about a specific ghost of some kind, right? But it's not real. It's designed to scare and to get you to imagine or to get you to feel something, but it's not real. And a lot of philosophers, unfortunately, were affected by the Western philosopher, the Western tradition, even some Muslim philosophers, those who at least said were Muslim. Like if you look at Al-Farabi, if you look at other philosophers like him, and Al-Kindi, even though they wrote so much on psychology of happiness and psychology of anxiety, and a lot of their work continues to be relevant, one of the mistakes they did in theology was assert the notion that, you know what, the Quran is not talking about real things. It's talking about things that are imaginary to get us to access some real truth. And the Prophet, his job is that of a philosopher. He understands content, but he simplifies it in a way that it becomes accessible to the masses. And this is not true. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not telling us things to get us to be scared, to get us to imagine certain things that are not real. No, the Quran is real. Al-Haqqa is real. What Allah mentions is real. And that's why one of the du'as of the Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam in Ramadan, he says, Ya Allah, I bear witness that your Quran is the truth, that your word is the truth, was-sa'atu haqq, and that the resurrection, wal-qiyamah, and the hour are all real. This is one of the du'as of the Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam to assert the reality of these things. So what do these words mean? When we talked about Sakha, Al-Tamma, Al-Haqqa, we said that each word captures a component. So for example, Al-Tamma is as we discussed, it's the shocking reality that leaves you confused. So one word captures the mental exhaustion associated with the Day of Resurrection. One captures the physical exhaustion associated with the Day of Resurrection. And here, Al-Qari'ah captures the sound. The sound. That the strike itself. So what's the sound? we are told that when Israfil is going to blow, make that final blow, it is going to be so loud that Allah here calls it Al-Qari'ah. So Al-Qari'ah captures the sound of the day of resurrection, the sound of the blow that awakens people up. And Al-Qari'ah, if you look at the word, Al-Qari'ah linguistically refers to Ash-Shay'u Thaqil, something which is very heavy. You say in Arabic, Qara'atul Bab, I've knocked the door so hard that it woke people instantly. You know, when something is urgent and you knock the door very, very loud, that is in Arabic described as Qara'atul Bab. And in Arabic also, Al-Mitraqa and Al-Miqra'ah is basically what you use. You know, the judge, when they stamp, when they hit the, when they hit the table, or when they finally give that khalas, it's the assertion, the decision is made, it's final order in the court. So that is called in Arabic al-miqra', because it not only lets out a sound, but it lets out a sound that indicates authority, that indicates it's time to pay attention, or indicates the decision is final. So all of these words capture the sound associated with the day of resurrection. Not only that, and again, the Arabic language is very powerful, because when you look at the English, it says the strike and disaster, but what part of the disaster are you describing? Right? So sometimes you're not able to capture through translation these layers of meanings. And that's why it's important to break the word down and understand things linguistically. If you look at the Arabic language further, the Arabs will say qawari'u suyuf. Referring to the war, they will say qawari'u suyuf, which means the sound of the swords striking, meeting. So the Arabs use the word qawari', or the words qawari' as-suyuf, the meeting of the swords, to refer to war. Because qawari' is again describing the loud sound of the sword. Tamam. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions al-qari'ah, again describing all these things. Mal qari'ah. Mal qari'ah. So Allah introduces it, al-qari'ah. Now you're going to ask, what is al-qari'ah? What is it referring to? And then that's what the second question raises. Mal qari'ah? What is the qari'ah? What is the striking disaster? وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا الْقَارِعَةِ? And how will you ever realize what this qari'ah is? So Allah first tells you al-qari'ah. So then you're asking yourself a question. What is al-qari'ah? And then the third ayah, the answer comes, whatever will allow you to realize what al-qari'ah is. You know, it's like imagine saying, marriage. What is marriage? But how can anybody ever know what marriage is until they're actually married? Do you get it? It's like, yes, you're trying to introduce a concept to people, but it'll just fly by. Imagine trying to explain to a kid what marriage is. Like, it's going to be difficult. You're going to simplify it, right? But it's a whole experience when you get married. Imagine trying to explain death to somebody that did not experience death. Or imagine, or hasn't experienced death in the family. Or imagine trying to experience or explain, the loss of a child to a child. Can you imagine a father trying to explain the loss of a child to a child? It's difficult, very difficult. So whenever you hear وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا الْقَارِعَةِ, وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا in the Quran many times, it's as if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, on your own you will never be able to realize this, and even what is to come is only going to allow you to grasp a component of it. You're only going to realize the gravity of the situation when you're actually in it. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you an image. يَوْمَ يَكُونُ النَّاسُ كَالْفَرَاشِ الْمَبْثُوثِ. When people on that day will be like the moths that are scattered. Mabthuth means what? Imagine in Arabic we say batha. What does batha mean? What does batha mean? Who can tell me? What does batha mean? Yeah? To broadcast, that's right. Al-bath, like al-hayy, live broadcast. That's right. What else? What does batha mean? Yeah? To spread. صح? وَبَثَّ مِنْهُمَا رِجَالًا كَثِيرًا وَنِسَاءً in Surah An-Nisa. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this word captures two things. It's to broadcast and also to spread. But it usually refers to spreading something quickly, something growing exponentially. But here it's referring to people coming out of the ground. يَوْمَ يَكُونُ النَّاسُ كَالْفَرَاشِ الْمَبْثُوثِ. So imagine the first strike brings everything to end. So everything is dead. The earth is silent. And it goes through all of these changes, and then all of the sudden, after however many years, there's another strike, And now almost instantly, everybody's resurrected so quickly and moving about so quickly, and there's so much chaos happening so quickly, it's like moths that are scattered. Imagine when you have flies running in every direction. Have you ever driven on the highway, like at a late Maghrib, right before Maghrib, Asr to Maghrib, and you're driving through farmland, no car in sight, and you have layers and layers of bugs that you're just driving through? And if it's a highway, like imagine 100 plus, these and they're flying so fast that you cannot see. You cannot see. That will be, Allah's giving you that image of people on that day behaving this way. So يوم يكون الناس كالفراش المبثوث وتكون الجبال كالعهن المنفوش. So people will be coming out running, moving quickly. Their information will be broadcasted, their news will be publicized, except those that Allah protects. We discussed this before. Not only that, the nature of the earth itself will change. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions وَتَكُونُ الْجِبَالُ كَالْعِهْنِ الْمَنْفُوشِ. Al-'ihn refers to the wool. So the mountains on that day will be like wool that has been carded. You'd imagine wool that you snatch into pieces, it becomes like what? It becomes like, very, very, very light. You blow on it and it will just fly away. So the mountains will be like wool that is flying in the air. Have you ever imagine when you blow some wool, like balls that have become so light, what happens? They fly. So some ulama have mentioned that gravity will be suspended. Like rocks, because imagine what is a mountain. A mountain is made of all these boulders that are going to be basically held together by some gravity force. But gravity will be disconnected or suspended to a point where things would just be floating. Everything around you would just be floating like wool, flying around. And this opinion is supported by the ayat in the Quran, like يَوْمَ تُبَدَّلُ الْأَرْضُ غَيْرَ الْأَرْضِ وَالسَّمَاوَاتِ. That the earth will be changed and the heavens will be changed. The rules that apply to us now will not apply, when it's the day of resurrection. The rules that apply to the earth are going to be suspended. The rules that apply to the heavens are going to be suspended. It's a completely different reality. وَتَكُونُ الْجِبَالُ كَالْعِهْنِ الْمَنْفُوشِ. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, فَأَمَّا مَنْ ثَقُلَتْ مَوَازِينُهُ فَهُوَ فِي عِيشَةٍ رَاضِيَةٍ وَأَمَّا مَنْ خَفَّتْ مَوَازِينُهُ فَأُمُّهُ هَاوِيَةٌ. As for the one whose deeds will be heavy, imagine, that person will live a life, not even live, فَهُوَ فِي, they will be immersed in a life that is pleased. The translation here, in a life of bliss, it's good, but it doesn't capture what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is describing here. What Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is describing here is that they will be immersed in a life that itself is pleased. Imagine what Allah is describing. The life itself is pleased. Can you imagine living such a great life that the life itself is chilling? Like you're not chilling only, the life itself is chilling. Like imagine saying that I have a car that is so good that the car itself is chilling. Like I'm not chilling in the car. Not only am I chilling, the car is chilling. So how does the car chill? Like it's decorated, you decked it up to the max. So the life is so comfortable that it's as if the life itself is chilling. Allahu Akbar. Tamam? So فَهُوَ فِي عِيشَةٍ رَاضِيَةٍ. The person who comes to Allah with heavy scales, and we see the hadith, the people themselves will be weighed on that day. The actions will be weighed. The intentions will be weighed. Lots of weighing on that day. So the ones that will come to Allah with heavy weights, based on sincerity, based on action, quality and quantity, then they will live that life. وَأَمَّا مَنْ خَفَّتْ مَوَازِينُهُ. But the one who comes to Allah with scales that are light, فَأُمُّهُ هَاوِيَةٌ. Their will be falling. هَاوِيَةٌ. هَاوِيَةٌ. فَأُمُّهُ هَاوِيَةٌ. Now, what does mean? When the Arabs say فَأُمُّهُ هَاوِيَةٌ, it refers to a few things. أُمُّهُ هَاوِيَةٌ, it could be al-ma'wa. In Arab language, what the Arabs will describe as your ultimate home. When you say, I'm going to my mother, meaning what? I'm going to the motherland, I'm going to my home, I'm going back to my mom, going back to my roots. So for ummuhu hawiya, here refers to al-ma'wa, the comfort, the place where you go for comfort. Meaning, like imagine when you have such a bad, difficult situation, you run to whoever you run to for support. In Arabic is called al-um. Usually because most of us will run to our mother. But let's say wherever you go, that abode, that place where you seek their comfort and nurturing and support, it's referred to as So فَأُمُّهُ هَاوِيَةٌ means their ma'wa, their support. Instead of going to a place looking for support, they will find what? Hawiyah. وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا هِيَ. And what is this hawiyah? نَارٌ حَامِيَةٌ. It's a scorching fire. So their ultimate support on that day will be scorching fire. Meaning that is the least, the highest level of comfort, the highest level of support they can ever get is a scorching fire. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله. Can you imagine what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying? Like there's no comfort. The maximum comfort you get is scorching fire. Another way of reading this, al-um in Arabic refers to al-ra's. So the ra's, the head of something is referred to as the because it's the first thing that you see and it's what defines the structure. So فَأُمُّهُ هَاوِيَةٌ means their head will be falling. Hawiyah means falling. And where will it be falling? Or what is it falling into? وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا هِيَ نَارٌ حَامِيَةٌ. It's falling into a scorching fire. That's what means. Either the place where you seek your refuge, or it refers to the center, the head of something, or is actually referring to the mother. فَأُمُّهُ هَاوِيَةٌ meaning if their mother were to find out about the kind of punishment that they would be going through in the akhirah, if the mother were to find that out or to see it, she would drop immediately into the ground. وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا هِيَ. And what is it that the mother has seen? نَارٌ حَامِيَةٌ. It is a scorching fire. So those are the three ways that it has been read. Now let's look at some good news. You know, whenever we read these ahadith or ayat that talk about the severity of the punishment, it's good to imagine that this is again reserved as a form of serving justice. All the injustice that is done in this dunya will not go unanswered, and such punishment is reserved exclusively for those who are committing that act of injustice. And sufficient as an act of injustice is to dismiss the fact that Allah is your Lord, and to ignore and to live a life away from connecting and acknowledging His existence. And that's why Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he says in the hadith which is authentic. How many of you guys know hadith al-bitaqa? Who knows about hadith al-bitaqa? This is an important hadith. Hadith al-bitaqa. Can you tell us what is hadith al-bitaqa? Even anything related to it. Ahsant. Beautiful. That's all you need. That's all you need. So the hadith al-bitaqa talks about on the day of resurrection, a man will come to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this person will have committed all the sins that you can imagine. Imagine all the sins that you can imagine. Zina, committed theft, cheating. And that person will be in such a disappointed state in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All of their good deeds will be weighed, or all of their bad deeds will be weighed, and they will be so immense. They will finally come to realize how much they've messed up. And they will come to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with the state, I'm definitely doomed. I will never be able to exit Jahannam. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will ask the angels to bring a card. It's called the bitaqa. A card. And this card is one of the very few, if not the only good deed that they've done. And this good deed will be asked, or the angels will be asked to place it on the other side of the scale. And that good deed, that bitaqa, will be enough that it will rise and overweigh, or it's going to be heavier than all the bad deeds that they've ever done. What is that bitaqa? That bitaqa is La ilaha illallah. There's no one worthy of worship except Allah. And this is why some of the ulama, some of them have the opinion that anybody who said La ilaha illallah will eventually enter Jannah. Anybody who said La ilaha illallah will eventually enter Jannah. Some ulama say you have to say both La ilaha illallah and Muhammadan Rasulullah. That you have to believe in Allah and believe in Muhammad as His messenger. But some, a minority, say that just Tawheed is enough to qualify you to enter Jannah. طيب? Which means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is on one side the most immense in His mercy if He chooses to deal with you through His mercy, and the most immense in His punishment if He chooses to deal with you through His punishment. So you must do something so terrible for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to deal with you through His justice. Because if he does, you're doomed. And that's why we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Ya Allah, in the dua, and you've heard this in Ramadan, we did not disobey you out of disrespect, but we disobeyed you out of weakness. And Ya Allah, we know that if you were to deal with us through your justice, none of us would make it. So deal with us through your grace and your mercy, not because we deserve it, but because you love to give out your mercy. It's an important hadith to make, an important dua to make. So keep that in mind. Contextualize all these difficult surahs. All these difficult surahs are speaking to the harsh heart. The heart that is disengaging from the orphan, showing disrespect to the poor. The heart that is arrogant. That heart requires a waking up. It requires the harshness. But if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you a gentle heart, where when you hear these ayat, tears come down your eyes and imagine how can people be in Jahannam and all this torture, and if Allah has given you that heart, that's a good sign. Keep it and hold on to it and ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to deal with you through His mercy. Tamam? But don't let your concern for another human being cause you to ask questions about the justice of Allah. Does that make sense? So don't ever call into question the justice of Allah, because then you're on a downward slope. You're on a downward slope. You're questioning Allah's justice. Who am I to question Allah's justice? Who am I to ask, how can you do this, Ya Allah? I never ask that question. The question that I ask is, Ya Allah, allow me to better understand. Allow me to better understand your justice. Allow me to better understand your mercy. Because I'm limited and you're unlimited. And there's much beyond me. So give me submission and the ability to be comfortable with the knowledge and the reality of knowing that I will never know everything. And knowing that I can never know everything until I meet you. So this is again Surah Al-Qari'ah. وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا هِيَ نَارٌ حَامِيَةٌ. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us. Let's move on to Surah At-Takathur. Let's recite the surah together. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ألهاكم التكاثر حتى زرتم المقابر كلا سوف تعلمون ثم كلا سوف تعلمون كلا لو تعلمون علم اليقين لترون الجحيم ثم لترونها عين اليقين ثم لتسألن يومئذ عن النعيم. Such a short surah, but so much history. Let's begin with the cause of revelation. There's a beautiful story behind this surah. And some of the Mufassirun mention that this surah was actually revealed regarding two tribes. Two tribes. And the two tribes were basically boasting about what they each have. The two tribes, in one narration, Abd al-Manaf and Sahl. And another, and this is in Mecca. In another narration, it was actually the Ansar and the Jewish tribes in Medina. Right? And you can imagine that it probably happened between tribes in Mecca and tribes in Medina. And then some people recited the surah to kind of address the two instances. But most likely this is a surah that was revealed in Mecca to address that first conversation between the two tribes. And then some of the companions remembered it later when there was a conversation happening between the Ansar and the Jewish tribes. So what is the conversation? What happened is the two tribes, Abd, Manaf and Sahl, were boasting. We have this many warriors. Well, we have this many swords. We have this many scholars. We have this many philanthropists in our tribe. We have these people. We have these people. We have this scholar. We have that scholar. They kept boasting to a point where they basically, everything that they have, they were able to provide some form of competition for. We have this many horses. We have this many camels. We have this many sheep. We have this many, goats. And it came to a point where it was a deadlock. It was hard to figure out which of them was better. So they said, okay, let us go to the graveyards and let us count the greats, the heroes from among our dead, and let us count the greats from among your dead. And then that way we'll determine which of our tribe is better. So ألهاكم التكاثر, the competition for more attention and more prestige has distracted you or consumed you to the point where it took you to your graves. حتى زرتم المقابر. Where it took you to your graves to now figure out which of us is better, because which of us had more heroes, Well, okay, fine. You have more this, more that. But our great-great-great-grandfather was this. And our great-great-great-great-founder was this. And our great-great-great was this. And subhanallah. So we desire affirmation so much that sometimes we will go to that extent of going to the grave and counting our dead, counting your dead. And this may sound crazy to you, but people do this now. People do this even over sports teams. Today with the final, Champions League final, the conversations about Liverpool and Madrid. Well, we have Muhammad Salah. Well, we have Benzema. We have this, we have that. Okay, it's such a great time. And then when you're not able to base some players, where do you go? Well, in our history, we won Champions League this many. We won the League Cup this many. People do that all the time. People do it all the time. Right? Even sometimes, like you'll find, subhanAllah, we'll have this sense of loyalty even towards universities. U of T is this, and York is this, and Western is this, and Miskeen McMaster is, no, McMaster is great, mashallah. Right? So people, well, this guy graduated, like, really? To a point where you're boasting about the number of students that have graduated. It was the U of T students way back who cured insulin or provided, طيب, mashallah, yani. So you have this sense of loyalty and competition and almost aggressive towards aggression towards others based on very, very what? Based on very, very unsettled ground. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed this ayah, some ulama say regarding this incident. Others say the meaning applies even beyond the incident. Beyond that incident, that you have been distracted by the competition for more until it drove you to your graves. Until it drove you to your graves. أَلْهَاكُمُ التَّكَاثُرُ حَتَّى زُرْتُمُ الْمَقَابِرِ. You know what this means? It means somebody worked so hard to collect more money, to the point where they lost their life in the process. They killed themselves in the desire for more. They got, they tasted the 100,000, they're like, I want the million. So now they're working, instead of 8 hours a day, they're working 15, 20 hours a day. They're sleeping very little. They're compromising their health. They're compromising their relationships. So the desire for more drove them to their own grave. أَلْهَاكُمُ التَّكَاثُرُ حَتَّى زُرْتُمُ الْمَقَابِرِ. Or others have read it in the way that you were distracted by the desire for more so much that you only stopped competing when you were finally put into your graves. Can you imagine that you're so hungry for dunya that the only time you stop pursuing it is when you were dead? And until that moment happens, you're still going to be consumed by lust. And that's going to be coming soon in the next surah. So think about what's driving you. What are you competing for? Right? SubhanAllah, if you look at the human beings, we're driven by so much desire for more. If you look at most of us, we recognize our success based on what? Based on not what we have, but based on what's around us. If you look at 15 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 100 years ago, a comfortable lifestyle is very different from now. Like if you look at what's considered to be a comfortable home 30 years ago, it's very different from what's considered to be a comfortable home now. Even if you move into, like imagine this. I know one brother, he moved into a new house. Now, with the market, he was able to sell his old home and buy a new home and make some money in the process. Now, when he moved into the house, at the beginning, he was very happy. He was like, wow, look at the luxury. It's so beautiful. MashaAllah, it's so good. He was so happy. But then 2 weeks later, he found out that everybody in the neighborhood has a pool in the backyard, but his house doesn't. The miskeen could not sleep the nights. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. My house is the only house in the neighborhood that doesn't have a pool? What a shame. Man, I got scammed. I got so scammed. I should have at least did a Google map, like look at the street views, like top view, like could not sleep the nights. Khalas. Tayyib, ya ammi, you made the $200,000 profit. He's like, you know what? I need to build a pool in the back, so that way I'm able to match the new standard. And that's unfortunately what happens with people, is you're always pursuing that extra goal, but when you get to the extra goal, the people at that level are chasing another goal. So you're like, okay. You're like, alhamdulillah, I'll be so happy with a bachelor's degree. You get the bachelor's degree, you're in that space, and then everybody's there. What am I going to do with this? Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much. MashaAllah. I love that. He's like, just in case you need it. MashaAllah. Right? May Allah bless you. You get into that batch, everybody's working on their masters. You go into everybody's working on their PhD. You get into the PhD, everybody's working on the postdoc. You get into everybody's doing 2-3 postdocs. You get into that position, there are people now that are going back for a second PhD in another field. So you're always like you're stuck in this rat race. And then you ask yourself, why are you doing it? Because everybody's doing it. But what do you want? I don't know. I don't know what I want. What am I? I don't even know. So they're not asking the existential question, like, what's the purpose of this? How is this benefiting me? What's the ultimate goal? You're just trying. There's a process. Everybody seems to be going down this path. I'll just go down this path. So it's socially constructed. Value and what's success and how success is defined is socially constructed. And that's why happiness is very short-lived in this dunya. Short-lived. Because quickly, as soon as you get something, you now start comparing yourself to a new group, and then the standards are higher there, and standards are higher there, and standards are higher there. So it never ends. Never ends. You think that when you start driving that Mercedes or Lambo, you'll be happy. You'll sit in that car. The first 2 weeks, you're thrilled, yeah. There's no doubt. But then you start comparing yourself. There's always a better car, a bigger car. Always people who have more. You have 2? Miskeen. I know one guy who has 17. Wallah, I know one guy I told you about the guy before. He has 17 garages connected to his house. MashaAllah. All sports cars. That's life. So you're always going to be miskeen compared to somebody else. So where do you stop? At what point do you stop? Where do you draw the line? So ألهاكم التكاثر حتى زرتم المقابر. You've been distracted by the pursuit for more until you reached or until it drove you to your death, until you visited your graves. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, كلا سوف تعلمون. Soon indeed you will come to know. ثم كلا سوف تعلمون. And soon indeed you will come to know. So this is mentioned twice. Whenever you have something mentioned twice in the Quran, one of the important things that the Mufassirun say is that it's for emphasis. Right? For emphasis. You repeat something twice because it's important. Right? And this even works in classes. You repeat something twice because you want the student to remember. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions something twice in the Quran, it's to assert the importance. Others say no, the Quran doesn't just mention things twice because only for importance, because there are actually 2 meanings. So they say the first time Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about the things that you will come to know in dunya. As if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, you will come to know when you get the thing that you're pursuing, that it's never enough. So you yourself will come to know that you're going to come to know that you're stuck in a rat race. So كَلَّا سَوْفَ تَعْلَمُونَ. You will know by pursuing that which you're trying, that's never going to be enough. So you will come to realize that about yourself. ثُمَّ كَلَّا سَوْفَ تَعْلَمُونَ. And finally, when you're put in your grave, you will come to know that it was not worth it. And alha or laha, it means actually to be distracted. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, your competition or desire for more amongst yourselves kept you distracted from what? From that which is more important. But Allah does not mention what is it that is more important. Allah says, you will come to know eventually what is more important. And indeed, you will come to know eventually what is more important. So there are 2 realization moments in everybody's life. The first realization is when they get what they were thinking they needed, they will realize that it was not what they needed. And that's why you have people have this midlife crisis when they're 40, when they're 50, when they're 60. They say, you know what, it's not money, it's not power, it's not prestige, it's relationships. Invest in your relationships. If I can go back, I would spend time with my wife, I would spend time with my kids. Well, of course, because you have the money and the wealth, you grew out of it, so now you're appreciating kids. And then the people who had kids and enjoyed the relationships, you'd be like, go back, what's your biggest regret? I wish I had a little bit more money. I wish I had invested in my health. Everybody has like different realizations. But mostly, everybody will come to realize relationships were very important. Relationships were very important. But then what happens when they're put in their grave? They realize that there's another relationship that should have been more important. The relationship with Allah. So there are 2 moments of realizations. A realization in the dunya that happens eventually, كَلَّا سَوْفَ تَعْلَمُونَ, and another realization that happens in the grave. Others said there are 2 realizations, one that happens when you're in the grave, كَلَّا سَوْفَ تَعْلَمُونَ, and another happens, ثُمَّ كَلَّا سَوْفَ تَعْلَمُونَ, when you finally meet Allah. But either way, there are 2 realization points, at least in our lives. كَلَّا لَوْ تَعْلَمُونَ عِلْمَ الْيَقِينَ. If only you knew the knowledge of yaqeen. Now this is important, we're going to talk about this quickly. There are three different levels of knowledge in Islamic pedagogy, or think about like epistemology. There are three levels of knowledge. There's ilm al-yaqeen, there's ayn al-yaqeen, and there's haqq al-yaqeen. Let me say that again. Ilm al-yaqeen, ayn al-yaqeen, haqq al-yaqeen. Let me give you a practical example. Ilm al-yaqeen, if you ask an average Muslim, if I ask Anas, how are you doing, Anas? Handsome guy, mashallah, Anas. Anas is young, mashallah, has been memorizing the Quran, and he's wanting to lead qiyam with us. Unfortunately, we're doing warsh, but eventually when we come back to Hafs, Anas will be leading with us. Beautiful voice, mashallah. Young Hafid, may Allah bless him. Now, Anas, if I ask you, do you know the Kaaba? Have you seen the Kaaba? In person? No. Have you touched the Kaaba? No. But you know the Kaaba is there. You know the Kaaba exists. Perfect. So Anas knows the Kaaba is there and the Kaaba exists. That is ilm al-yaqeen. He knows it's there. He knows it's there. Ayn al-yaqeen, Anas visits Mecca. He sees the Kaaba. Now his knowledge is much, it's different to know about something conceptually, it's another to see with your eyes. There's always a bit of a difference. Like sometimes people visit the pyramids of Egypt and they're like, I thought they're going to be much bigger, or I thought they're going to be much smaller. Right? So you have this conception in your mind and then you see reality. People see the Kaaba, they go, I thought it was going to be much bigger. I thought it was going to be much smaller. Because you've conceptualized in a different way. So ilm al-yaqeen is to know it conceptually, in your mind. You've imagined it. Even if you saw on TV, you can't tell how big it is until you see it in person. Even if you have the comparison of a person next to it, because it's such big, it's difficult to imagine from an actual in-person experience. And imagine back then when people didn't even have videos or cinematography, it was much different. Right? So ilm al-yaqeen is to know about it, to conceive it in your mind. Ayn al-yaqeen is to see it. Haqq al-yaqeen is to interact with it. So when you open the keys of the Kaaba and you actually go inside, then you have what? Haqq al-yaqeen. You know it, you've seen it, you've been inside. You've experienced it at a different level. Ilm al-yaqeen is to know that the salah is good for you. You know it. Ayn al-yaqeen is to actually see somebody praying and being touched by the salah so much, like, wow, this is amazing. Haqq al-yaqeen is to actually experience the power of the salah yourself. So those are three levels of awareness and realizations. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, كَلَّا لَوْ تَعْلَمُونَ عِلْمَ الْيَقِينِ. Ilm al-yaqeen is just the base. It's not even ayn al-yaqeen, it's not even haqq al-yaqeen. It's the base level of actually conceiving and understanding. If you were to know, even with the first level of certainty, if you were to conceptualize the reality of what's to come, لَتَرَوُنَّ الْجَحِيمِ. You would see hellfire. If you were to just engage your mind with the first level of actually putting yourself there and imagining and conceptualizing, you will see with your imagination the fire. And eventually when you actually end up going to Jannah, inshaAllah, all of us are going to make a journey past the fire. So we'll actually see with our eyes. وَإِن مِّنكُمْ إِلَّا وَارِدُهَا كَانَ عَلَى رَبِّكَ حَتْمًا مَقْضِيًّا. And every one of you will cross the fire. Will cross the fire. Some have said when you're passing over the sirat, you will see the fire on either side. Ya Allah, what a moment. May Allah protect us. Tamam? So this is the way to understand it. ثُمَّ لَتَرَوُنَّهَا عَيْنَ الْيَقِينِ. And eventually, you will see it. This is ayn al-yaqeen. It's the second level. So you'll imagine it with your eyes. If you actually understand the Quran, you will imagine it and you will see it as if it's there. But eventually you will end up seeing it because it is there. Do you see what Allah is saying? If you put your mind in a state where you actually read the Quran properly and put all the ayat together, you will begin to imagine and conceive what Jahannam looks like, because there's enough hints. There are enough hints in the Quran to get you to see it. But eventually you will see it with your own eyes. Ayn al-yaqeen. ثُمَّ لَتُسْأَلُنَّ يَوْمَئِذٍ عَنِ النَّعِيمِ. This is the final level of knowledge, is when you're asked in front of Allah about all the bounties and the blessings that He's given you. أَلْهَاكُمُ التَّكَاثُرُ. You were competing, you were racing, you were desiring more, that you forgot the blessings and the bounties in your life. You forgot the value of your health. Now Allah is going to ask you, what did you do with your health? You forgot the value of youth. What did you do with your youth? I was busy hustling, I was busy pursuing the PhD, I was busy serving, this and this and that. And that's honestly, subhanAllah, I really, really personally value those who recognize at a young age the importance, like actually what life is about. So they take a moment, suspend from everything else, suspend from the rat race. I don't care what anybody else is doing. I'm going to do what is good. You know, I really love, and I'm just sharing something personal here, when young people don't ascribe to the social pressure and they're like, you know what, I'm not going to pursue money and power and all of that. I will pursue relationships at a young age. You see, when I see a young guy hustling, getting married, young, investing in that relationship, I'm like, mashallah, may Allah bless you and protect you. When I see parents investing in that at a young age, may Allah bless you. And then when I see someone like that, deciding, you know, I'm going to push my master's or, you know, PhD a few years. I'm not going to give up on it, but push it a few years to do some actual work in the ummah, to go and travel and serve and help, to work, to volunteer for a community. I'll balance between pursuing my education and pursuing service so that I don't end up becoming 40, 50 stuck, because now, like, when are you going to do it? If you can't do it now, when are you going to do it? When are you going to do it? Really, when are you going to do it? When are you going to get time to serve the community, to volunteer, to help, to learn, to be involved, to do things that actually matter? And what I value even more are the people that are able to eventually balance and accomplish their goals. Because sometimes it can be a distraction. Sometimes people distract themselves from pursuing their goals by saying, I'm just serving people, I'm helping people. And in the end, they end up losing a lot because they haven't been able to advance or progress. Because guess what? If you're helping people all the time, what will people do? They'll walk over you. It's never like you do for Allah. So you don't distract yourself from pursuing your goals by serving others. You serve others, it grounds you, it makes you humble, and you continue achieving, continue developing. And that balance is amazing. That realization at a young age of what's important, that service at a young age, and then coming back to invest in yourself so you can continue to give more, and investing in people for the sake of Allah, not for them. Those realizations at a young age are amazing, incredible. Learn from the previous stories. And that's why I always encourage people, at a young age, visit sick people on their deathbed. I've learned more from people in their last few moments than I've learned in books. Right? You talk to the families when they're coming here to bury their dead. Listen to them. Listen to their regrets. It'll change your life. I just had a conversation before coming here. A brother, he said, I decided to put my education aside, put my career aside, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to memorize the Quran. And the first time that I hear someone say that, or the first thing that I have or thought that I have, is I always want to ask, like, why? I want to know where your headspace is at. So I asked, why did you do that? Why are you deciding to memorize the Quran? He said, it's the single most praiseworthy goal that I can do with my time. I'm like, why? He's like, I have been volunteering with a funeral team for the last 9 months. I have seen people with millions, billions, hundreds of thousands, everything you can imagine, come, and they all have the same regret. What's that same regret? I wish I did more for Allah. I wish I did more in my relationship with Allah. And what's the greatest thing that I can do in terms of my relationship with Allah? Dedicate time to the Quran. What's the greatest thing that I can do in terms of the Quran? Memorize the Quran. It's as simple as that. So I don't want to get to the point where I'm having those regrets. I want to do that now. SubhanAllah. So spend time with people that are sick. Spend time with people that are dying. Spend time with older, senior, respected community members. There's a lot to learn. And don't get so stuck in the rat race that you're just comparing yourself to everybody else of that goal. Because everybody's thinking the same way. Talk to somebody who's graduated. Talk to somebody who's past that goal. They can give you more insight. And don't be distracted. Right? Don't be distracted in serving others from your own aspirations. And don't be so consumed by your own aspirations that you forget serving others. It's a balance, and that balance is very difficult to find and strike. But it's important to. Tamam? ثُمَّ لَتُسْأَلُنَّ يَوْمَئِذٍ عَنِ النَّعِيمِ. A quick story here. The Prophet ﷺ, he was sitting with his companions, and this is Mecca, and they were in the 1.5 years of boycott. They had no food, nothing. To the point where they were so hungry that they were walking around seeing if any of the companions had food. And they were trying to be subtle about it. So Umar left his house and he's walking around to other people and wondering if anyone can invite him. You know when you're so hungry that you're walking around hoping somebody would invite you over for food? Have you ever been have you ever been so broke, so hungry that you're just walking around hoping somebody invites you for food? Some of the university students can relate. Miskeen, no? None of you can relate? MashaAllah. Such a privileged community. It's real, by the way. That level of poverty is real. I know one brother, he was telling me, just imagine, my sisters and my brothers, because we think, life is great, but it can be very difficult for people. One guy was telling me just a few hours ago that he received an invitation to a wedding, and he's struggling to attend the wedding. He doesn't know how to say no, because it will cost money to get a haircut, it will cost money to buy a suit, it will cost money to buy shoes, it will cost money to give that gift, and he doesn't have money for those things. Wallahi, this happened today. Wallahi thumma wallahi, just a few hours ago. So we take things for granted. People are actually living this life. And the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and his community went through that. They went through a year and a half, almost 2 years, 18 months of limited access to food, to the point where they had to walk around hoping that one of their friends would invite them over for food. So Umar left his house hoping that someone else would invite him. Abu Bakr left his house hoping somebody else would invite him. Rasulullah ﷺ opened his house, left his house hoping somebody would invite him. The three met when a third companion happened to be there. They had a conversation and then they realized they all left the house for that same reason. He told them, I have a little bit of meat left in my house. Come, let's all share. So they come, they have a seat. As they're eating that meat, Abu Bakr begins to cry. Everybody's like, what's happening, ya Abu Bakr? Why are you crying? He's like, we were able to get this meat because we know people. But what about those who don't know people? Because we got connects, but what about those who don't have connections? And is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala going to ask us about this privilege? Think about how many privileges that you have that people don't have. So Abu Bakr cried because of that privilege. And he recited, when they asked him why, he said, I remembered this surah. I remembered Surah Al-Takathur. And then he recited the surah, and then he finished with this ayah, ثُمَّ لَتُسْأَلُنَّ يَوْمَئِذٍ عَنِ النَّعِيمِ. And on that day, you will be asked about all the bounties and all the blessings. Right, let's move on to the next surah, Surah AlAsad. And we'll take a quick break after this, inshallah, just to stretch, and then continue, inshallah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes an oath by this surah. But before we get into the surah, there is a few things that you need to know about this surah. This surah, Imam al-Shafi'i said, لو تأمل الناس وعملوا بها لو تأمل الناس سورة العصر وعملوا بها لكفى. If people were to reflect on Surah Al-Asr and implement it, it will be sufficient. Others, like Malik ibn Dinar, said if the only surah of the Quran to be revealed is Surah Al-Asr, it would have been sufficient. The companions used to read Surah Al-Asr to each other when they left. So let's say you're going for travel, I'm going for travel, we would say salam, and the last thing we would say to each other, وَالْعَصْرِ إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ. It's also known as the kafara of the majlis. Whenever you have a meeting, MSA meeting, team meeting, community meeting, the last thing that should be done in that meeting is reciting Surah Al-Asr, because of what meanings are contained therein. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes an oath by the Asr. The Asr, as Amr ibn al-As says, and there's a long story with Amr ibn al-As and his interaction with the surah and what it meant, but he was of the opinion, and Muqatil and Mujahid and others have highlighted this, the Asr refers to somebody's lifespan. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, by your time, by your individual time. Allah is taking an oath by your entire lifespan, from beginning to an end. Others say that it refers to time in general, the beginning of humanity till the end of humanity. Others say that it begins the time of the universe, from the beginning of the universe till the end of the universe. Others say it refers to time as a construct. So whether it's time as an object, whether it's time as your own lifespan, time of humanity, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is taking an oath by time. By time, as it ticks. إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ. Indeed, the human being is in, not losing, but in a state of loss. لَفِي خُسْرٍ. Now here there are three, in Arabic there are things called mu'akkidat, assertions. When Allah uses a tool of tawqeed, it is to state that this is absolutely true. Inna is a form of tawqeed. La is a form of tawqeed. Al-qasam is a form of tawqeed. Tawqeed in Arabic. So Allah says, wal-asr, He takes an oath. When He says something, I swear this is true. That's a qasam. It shows you that this is very important. So Allah asserts here 3 assertions. Inna, la, fi, and an asr. Those are 3 assertions in Arabic that indicate what is to come is absolutely true. What is absolutely true? Indeed, the human being truly is in a state of loss. So we're always losing. You're always losing. Either you're losing money, either you're losing sleep, either you're losing health, either you're losing friends, either you're losing time. Wherever you prioritize, you have to always what? Lose elsewhere. If I'm pursuing money and traveling, what am I losing out on? Time with my family. If I'm focusing on time with my family, what am I losing on? Making money. If I'm studying, for the MCAT or my MD or my law school, LSAT, I'm sitting there, I haven't seen sunlight. People, remember in your exam season? Like people are like, man, look at everybody's posting on Instagram, look at the sun, mashallah, beautiful view. Like, bro, what season are we in? Right? Like some of that, when you're in that state, like some of you, I know some of you have been studying and just, and you're working so hard studying, the last 4 years are a blur. Some people are like, I don't even know what's happened in Ukraine, man. I don't have time to catch up with the news. I'm busy, it's too much to catch up on. The Palestinian crisis, like what happened in the last 5 years? I haven't been caught up. Right? Others are so focused on investment. SubhanAllah, with the crypto market and the real estate market, I know some guys who have 8 screens at home. 8 screens. Every screen is capturing the stocks that they have money in. Miskeen, this guy doesn't sleep. 4 or 5 hours. I can't miss out on opportunity. I can't miss out on opportunity. So you're always losing somewhere. You're always losing out on something. Wherever you choose to focus. Now that's a very, very bad way of looking at life. Like I'm losing, it doesn't matter what I do, I'm lost. Because Allah says, إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ. Now imagine, whatever you choose to do with your life, whatever you choose to do, is it really, really going to be of value? Let's say, for example, you decided to you had one goal in life, which is to be the richest man in the world. The richest man in the world. You attained that goal. You got past Elon Musk, or the richest woman in the world. Now, you got to that goal. What happens to all your wealth? Do you take it with you? Nothing. So what a loss. You're so miskeen. What a loss. You worked your entire life, and you don't take a single penny with you. Miskeen. Wallahi miskeen. What a loss. Absolute loss. When you think about it. You work to be the smartest guy in the world. You set a record for the biggest and the highest number of degrees in the world. I know guys, that's their goal. I want to get the highest number of degrees. Why? Just cause. I want to be the fastest man in the world. Okay, now what happens? You became the fastest man in the world. Are you going to take your speed with you when you're 60, when you're 70? You became the smartest person in the world. Are you going to take your knowledge with you when you're 90, 100 years of age? One of the saddest things to see, very sad, wallahi, very sad, is when you see somebody of knowledge. Imagine as a young student, I have had to sit in the circles of some of the best minds in the world. And then I was also in a position where I was serving them when they became 80, 90, 100 years of age. And one of the saddest things to see is a memory of a scholar vanish. Imagine the person that taught you the hadith that you know and the Quran that you know, looking at you and saying, what's that surah again? Surah Al-Ikhlas. It's Qul something, isn't it? Subhanallah. There's loss. That's the nature of this dunya. You can't ignore that reality. You won't take your money with you. You won't take your knowledge with you if it was just for the sake of knowledge. Right? You won't take your wealth with you. You won't take your degrees with you. There's always loss. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions it very clearly. Everybody's going to be in a state of loss, living in that constant loss, except those who believe in Allah. Because when they believe in Allah, they will do things for Allah. And when they do things for Allah, the reward stays with Allah. But they didn't just believe, they did. وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ. They did good. They did good, they left legacies behind. Those legacies may be forgotten, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't forget. إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ. And they encouraged each other to hold on to truth, and they encouraged each other to be patient. You want everything that you're working for to actually mean something at the end? Believe, do righteous deeds, encourage others to hold on, to be patient, and encourage others to hold on to truth. Uncompromising. You have morals that you will not compromise. You have values that will not compromise. You have capital T, truth, that you believe in, that you're not going to compromise. Those are the things that will actually carry you through this dunya. Those are the things that will actually make things make sense. Otherwise, when you sit back and think about it, wallahi, this dunya doesn't make any sense. To live for this dunya doesn't make any sense. Absolutely chaotic if you just think about the implications. Any socially constructed agreement and contract between people is bound to break and have limitations. Bound to break and have limitations. Anything. And you come to realize that. You come to realize that. Any institution, if there's no taqwa of Allah, if there's no actual belief in Allah, it'll fail. Think about think about any institution. Let's look at democracy. The biggest, most celebrated thing in this world. We love our democracy, we love our... Now, democracy, isn't it hijacked in many places? If I want to make a specific party win in an area, all I have to do is redraw the boundaries. Right? Redraw the boundaries. Put groups together, put cities together, towns together, and I completely shift the outcome. And that's me working within what? The rules of democracy. So it becomes a game for people. The rules of the court, justice, it becomes a game that people play with words and technicalities. Looking for things, paperwork that went wrong, that wasn't filled out. Technicalities. In front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there are no technical errors. There are no loopholes in any systems. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees beyond the apparent. So إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, except those who believe, وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ, do righteous deeds, وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ, and encourage truth and encourage patience. Tamam? This, subhanAllah, about the surah, there's a famous story of Al-Mu'tamid ibn Abbad. How many of you guys know Ibn Abbad, Al-Mu'tamid ibn Abbad? He was living in Andalusia. And he was one of the amirs at the time. And he had so much money. He lived during the golden age of Islam. He had so much money that one day his kids, his daughters, were playing outside. As little kids, they were playing outside in mud. And the people were like, oh my God, the emir's daughters are playing in mud. That's crazy. Can you imagine? They were so used to luxury that they were shocked. The people were so used to the luxury of the emir and the life of the emir that they were shocked that the kids would be playing in mud. The news reached the emir, so he wanted to make a point. So what he did is he prepared a pool of musk. And the most expensive fragrances in the world. He prepared a pool. And he asked his kids to jump in it and to play in it. Just to make a statement. That I have so much wealth that this is what I'm going to do. SubhanAllah, wars, civil tension, economic failure. A few years later, 10 years later, his daughters were so poor that they had to work as laborers to comb other people's hair just to make money. And that was the only job that they were able to get. And so when he was in jail, prisoned by the people who took over, it happens to power. It's never, like, so much can happen. وَتِلْكَ الْأَيَّامُ نُدَاوِلُهَا بَيْنَ النَّاسِ. That's the nature of this dunya. There's no security in this dunya. So you can't live for the dunya, because anything can happen. A few years later, he was visited in jail, and he was drafting poetry. He's writing all these lines of poetry. You're in jail, 7 years. What are you going to do? You become a poet. You become an artist in jail. Right? This is before the online media and you're able to pursue a PhD while you're in jail, right? Back then, you become a poet. You ask for books and you start reading. So you develop your artistic style. So, one of the people, ulama, that visited him, saw this entire line of poetry, and he said, wow, you've written 300 plus lines of poetry about loss to describe what Allah mentioned in Surah AlAsad. And he's like, you know what? Man, yani, look, it's the only thing that I had to come for me. Why you gotta bash it like that? It's the last thing that I had going for me. My poetry, why you gotta bash it like that? And then he said, Sadaqt. You've indeed said the truth. Surah Al-Asr is sufficient. Sufficient as a reminder of loss and as a marker for loss. How's everyone feeling on time? Do you guys want to take a break now, or do you want to go until Maghrib and take a break then? Okay, those who want to go till Maghrib, you can raise your hand. Okay, excellent. Perfect, that's great. That's the majority. طيب, we'll continue inshallah. That is Surah Al-Asr. The next surah is Surah Al-Humazah. This is an incredible surah as well. All of these surahs, as you can imagine, they're very beautiful, very short, and full of many meaningful lessons. Let's recite the surah and break it down together. And feel free if you want to take a stretch, a water break, no problem, inshallah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم ويل لكل همزة لمزة الذي جمع مالا وعدده يحسب أن ماله أخلده كلا لينبذن في الحطمة وما أدراك ما الحطمة نار الله الموقدة التي تطلع على الأفئدة إنها عليهم مؤصدة في عمد ممددة. Surah Al-Humazah is revealed regarding a specific trope in Quraysh. And this trope, I'm sure a lot of us can connect to this trope. How many of you guys know somebody that has like a bunch of cash in their house, and whenever they're feeling down, they open the suitcase and they start counting the money? Start sniffing the money. It smells good, almost there. Anybody? You can raise your hand if you know. No, actually don't. No? This is back then. Now, you know somebody? Mashallah. Khair. I know, nowadays it's digital. It's digital currency. So maybe you're not going to open your suitcase, you open your digital wallet, you're counting your Bitcoin, mashallah, all these addresses. You don't need an offshore account. It's all in crypto stored, mashallah, black mark. I'm not giving a fatwa on the halal, haram issue here. That's a big discussion. In mentioning cryptocurrency, I'm not asserting that it's halal to invest in. That's not what I'm doing. I'm just describing a reality around us. I have to preface that because, just in case, tamam? And I'm not asserting it's haram either. I'm just saying that it's not my area to comment on, tamam? Now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is describing this kind of person. وَيْلٌ لِكُلِّ هُمَزَةٍ لُمَزَةٍ. This is a specific person who has collected so much money that they think their money gives them the right to look down upon others. And I'm sure in your own life, I'm sure you can think of at least a few people like that. People have so much money, they're always looking down upon others. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions here Humazah and Lumazah. Humazah, Lumazah, and Ghumazah. There are three things in the Quran that Allah describes. Al-Hams, Wal-Lams, Wal-Ghams. Hams is to mock somebody using your hand. Al-Lams is to mock somebody or to hurt somebody using your tongue. And then Al-Ghams is to mock somebody or to hurt somebody using your eye, your gesture. So Hams is like, you're like, get out of here, silly poor man. Get out of here, old man. So you actually physically hurt somebody. You physically make somebody feel inferior to you. So excuse me, when you're in my company, you need to look up. You can't be on my eye contact level. So you use physical barriers between you and people to subdue others. Lams is where you use your tongue. Backbiting counts as lams. Ghiba and namima count as lams. You're like this person. You say something about them that they wouldn't like being said. And then ghams is where you use your gesture. You haven't said anything, but like, those guys, not saying anything. But or like, somebody walks in, they're donating money, like, $50. Miskeen. Right? You might not even say $50, but you're just like, right? And in your mind you thought, what's $50? Miskeen guy donating $50. A kid volunteering their energy, like, waste. Waste. These kids. I actually had somebody, once an uncle, this happened in my presence. There are very few people in my life that I despise for the sake of Allah. People that I despise for the sake of Allah. I see them and I get angry. There are a few of them, I'm not going to mention their names. But there are a few, I can count them on one hand. I despise them for the sake of Allah. And one of them is a man that is absolutely arrogant. He once saw a bunch of kids volunteering in the masjid. When I say kids, like 12, 13, 14-year-olds. And he came to them, he said, why are you wasting your time? Go get a job. Go do something with money. Like, do something useful. Why are you wasting your time with this? This is meaningless. Nonsensical. This is not the only reason I dislike him. A lot of other examples, right? But this attitude of like, just looking down upon volunteering, upon giving, upon others. So, these three levels. Al-Hams is to use your body, Al-Yad, the hand, to hurt or to ridicule or to mock. Al-Lams is to use your tongue, backbiting, lying, mocking somebody using tongue. And then Ghams is to use your gestures, your eye or your head, to indicate a gesture of you expressing that you're better than somebody. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, like, woe, wail, this place in Jahannam, terrible outcome for this person that is engaging in this Hams and Lams. And then also Ghams in other parts of the Quran. Who is this person? الذي جمع مالا وعدده. Another qira'ah, الذي جمع مالا وعدده. Now this is, the Quran is so precise, guys. Wallahi, I love this word, عدده. For all the businessmen in the room, look at this. عدده describes everything that you as a businessman do with your money. عدده, so جمع collects. They're always looking to collect money. They have like, gotta more. So they're looking at everything around them as an opportunity for money. That's the way they think. You teach kids Quran? You do? I have a way for you to optimize that. Call me. Here's my card. You do counseling? Here's my card. We can make it more efficient. Call me. Everything around them is a money-making opportunity. You guys don't charge for this? You guys don't charge for... And by the way, it's money for the sake of money. And people who think that way, but for the sake of actually improving the program, that's fine. But money for the sake of money. Wait a second. You're not charging? No, you got to charge. So, Jamma, you always have to monetize. That's the way they think. Monetize. Jamma, there's more. We can collect more money. Jamma amalan wa addada. Addada has a few meanings. Addada, think, who speaks Arabic? Who's good with Arabic? Lots of you speak Arabic. Who can tell me the words addada? What does addada mean? Yeah? Counting. Addada, to keep counting. That's one. So addada means to keep counting. You got your money, keep counting. You check your bank account every like 20 minutes. Maybe something else came. Maybe something else came. Maybe that paycheck came. Maybe that investment came in. Checking your stocks every couple of minutes. طيب, addada. What does addada also mean though? Doesn't just mean to count. Yeah. To prepare. So they think their money is preparing them for what's to come. Or they're preparing for what's to come. So they're thinking, okay, I might get sick. So I need to have a fund for sickness. I might die. So I need to have a fund for death. I might XY, I might. My wife might take me to court. So I have to keep an offshore account. The tax service, the revenue agency might eventually come after me. So I have to have a way around that. The economy might fall in Canada, so I got to put some money in Finland. Finland might go to war in 3 years, so I got to put some money in. Like, this is not somebody who's mitigating risk, normal risk. This is somebody who cares about money so much that they've imagined a million possible situations and have prepared for each and every situation to go wrong. They don't have trust or faith in anything. So they have to keep putting faith in money. That money is what's going to save me. Think about like the typical ancient Egyptians. Gotta bury my treasures with me, so that when I wake up, they're there. So even they did not think only about their death. They did not think about their life. They even thought about death. Like, what happens when I wake up? When I'm resurrected, well, I'm not going to have no money. Got to put some money with me, guys. Got to take some gold bars at least. So addada means to prepare. So they've thought every possible outcome and they prepared for it. But what does addada also mean? Yeah. To diversify. Addada, to diversify. So they've collected and they've diversified their wealth. Bitcoin might crash. I don't want to put all my money there. That stock might drop. I don't want to put all my money there. The dollar, the US dollar might eventually, khalas, I can't just, so I gotta have gold bars, I gotta have silver, I gotta have a bunch of diamonds, I gotta have like a few houses in almost every country in the world because anything can happen. What if Canada goes to war? I can't access all my wealth. I need to be able to, what if all the European nation goes to war? Oh my God, that's crazy. I can't only have developments in Europe, developed nations. I gotta have like an island in Peru. I gotta have another island. What if the government, decides to ban all foreign investments? I gotta have a bunch of low-key houses in Nigeria, but they can't be in my name because then I won't be able to access them. If there's war and I'm Muslim or I'm white or I'm Canadian, they have to be in the name of a local. But how do I trust a local? It has to be in the name of a tribe. But then the tribe might take it away from. La hawla, miskeen guy. Miskeen. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about this attitude. الَّذِي جَمَعَ مَالًا وَعَدَّدَهُ يَحْسَبُ أَنَّ مَالَهُ أَخْلَدَهُ. He or she thinks that their wealth is what's allowing them or going to allow them to live forever. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, كَلَّا. No, that's not. Wealth is not going to do that to you. لَيُنْبَذَنَّ فِي الْحُطَمَةِ. That person will be لَيُنْبَذَنَّ فِي الْحُطَمَةِ. Some have understood it to be metaphorical and some have understood it to be literal. That person will eventually succumb to their own crush. That person will be crushed. Like imagine when they have that realization of what's to come, the akhirah, they will be crushed. It's as if they were thrown into a wall. They're chasing, they're running with all their wealth and they hit a wall. And when they hit that wall, that crash is devastating. So that's one way that it was understood. لَيُنْبَذَنَّ فِي الْحُطَمَةِ, that they will actually be thrown into the hutama, the crusher. You think about hatim, think about like when you burn wood, hatam, when you crush things together. So they will be thrown into the crusher. And what is the crusher? What is this thing that crushes all dreams, that crushes all hopes, that crushes everything that you've left behind, that compresses it into nothing? وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا الْحُطَمَةِ. What is this crusher? نَارُ اللَّهِ الْمُوقَدَةِ. The fire that is kindled, not by us, not a worldly fire. There's a hadith in which the Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said the fire of Yawm al-Qiyamah is 70 times worse than the fire that you know in this dunya. There's another hadith that it's 1 share of 70. That is 1 out of 70, this fire that we know in this dunya, of the fire that Allah has prepared in the akhirah. And I know a few of you just walked in, so let's preface this again. I'll remind you of the hadith. That whenever we're talking about these ayat, that talk about the devastation of Jahannam, the terrible punishment, the crushing and the burning and all these despicable images, remember that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about this attitude of arrogance, this really extreme attitude, as we discussed in the surah, الَّذِي جَمَعَ أَوْ جَمَّعَ مَالًا وَعَدَّدَهُ. And then there's the hadith of the bitaqa. Just remind again, that on the day of resurrection, there will be people coming who will have committed every sin that you can imagine. And those sins will be weighed and the person will say, I'm doomed, I'm doomed. And the angels will be told by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there's one bitaqa, one card, bring it. That bitaqa will be put and that bitaqa will outweigh every sin that person commits and committed. What is that bitaqa? La ilaha illallah. And it will eventually be sufficient for that person to enter Jannah. And that's why, as we mentioned, some ulama say that anyone of tawheed, anyone of true tawheed will eventually enter Jannah. Anyone who said La ilaha illallah will enter Jannah. And lived upon it, of course, will enter Jannah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us from the people of Jannah. Now what does التي تطلع على الأفئدة means? This fire will crush through the bone, the skin, and straight into the heart. It will go straight into the heart. Because that's where the arrogance was, as we're discussing in the surah. And others say that this fire has the ability to read what people's heart states were like in dunya, and it intensifies the heat based on that. Based on your arrogance level, the heat will increase. Based on your, pride, based on your lying, based on your deceit, based on the lust that you had in your heart, the fire will be increased or decreased. إِنَّهَا عَلَيْهِمْ مُؤْصَدَةٌ. Now, how many of you know the story behind this ayah? It will be sealed over them. It will be sealed over them. So, the Arabs who heard this ayah, they tried to be funny. They're like, wait a second. Fire needs oxygen to continue to be alive. Which means the fire has to be open. The Jahannam has to be open. Like Jahannam cannot be shut, because if it was shut, then the fire would die out. So it has to be open. And if it has an opening, there you go. We found the loophole. We're going to climb eventually and make it out. Like when the ayah in Surah Al-Muddathir was revealed, عليها 19, there are 19 guardian angels guarding Jahannam. Abu Jahl and others came together like, 19, that's it. I got 3, you got 4, you got 2, you can take all 18 by yourself. But you know what? We won't do that. Let's give everybody a chance. Knock the angels out, boom, we're out. That's it. You, Muhammad, and all your dreams and ayat about fire doesn't intimidate us. Oh, Jahannam, so what? Bunch of fire, that's why you're scaring us? Bro, we are people of the desert. We start fires, we put them out. Nothing. We'll just find the opening, the roof. We'll just go through the roof. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّهَا عَلَيْهِمْ مُؤْصَدَةٌ. It will be closed. There's no exit. There's no way out. There's no way out. فِي عَمَدٍ مُمَدَّدَةٍ. It will be tightly secured with long amad. Amad meaning like, this is a amud. Like a pillar. It'll be surrounded completely, shut. No way out. في عمد ممددة. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us. Allahumma ameen, ya Rabb, ameen. So inshallah we'll take a break here for Salat al-Maghrib. We'll pray Salat al-Maghrib. You can inshallah freshen up. We'll pray Salat al-Maghrib and come back inshallah to continue. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين الضالين آمين. لله ما في السماوات وما في الأرض وإن تبدوا ما في أنفسكم أو تخفوه يحاسبكم به الله فيغفر لمن يشاء ويعذب من يشاء والله على كل شيء قدير. آمن الرسول بما أنزل إليه من ربه والمؤمنون كل آمن بالله وملائكته وكتبه ورسله لا نفرق بين أحد من رسله وقالوا سمعنا وأطعنا غفرانك ربنا وإليك المصير. لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها لها ما كسبت وعليها ما اكتسبت ربنا لا تؤاخذنا إن نسينا أو أخطأنا ربنا ولا تحمل علينا إصرا كما حملته على الذين من قبلنا ربنا ولا تحملنا ما لا طاقة لنا به واعف عنا واغفر لنا وارحمنا أنت مولانا فانصرنا على القوم الكافرين. الله سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. والفجر وليال عشر والشفع والوتر والليل إذا يسر هل في ذلك قسم لذي حجر ألم تر كيف فعل ربك بعاد إرم ذات العماد التي لم يخلق مثلها في البلاد وثمود الذين جابوا الصخر بالواد وفرعون ذي الأوتاد الذين طغوا في البلاد فأكثروا فيها الفساد فصب عليهم ربك سوط عذاب إن ربك لبالمرصاد فأما الإنسان إذا ما ابتلاه ربه فأكرمه ونعمه مطعمه فيقول ربي أكرمن وأما إذا ما ابتلاه فقدر عليه رزقه فيقول ربي أهانن كلا بل لا تكرمون اليتيم ولا تحاضون على طعام المسكين وتأكلون التراث أكلا لما وتحبون المال حبا جما كلا إذا دكت الأرض دكا دكا وجاء ربك والملك صفا صفا وجيء يومئذ بجهنم يومئذ يتذكر الإنسان وأنى له الذكرى يقول يا ليتني قدمت لحياتي فيومئذ لا يعذب عذابه أحد ولا يوثق وثاقه أحد يا أيتها النفس المطمئنة ارجعي إلى ربك راضية مرضية فادخلي في عبادي وادخلي جنتي. Alright, Bismillah, Alhamdulillah, wa salatu wassalam ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi man wala. Everybody's invited back, sisters and brothers are invited back. We're going to continue, inshallah. We're aiming, bi-idhnillah ta'ala, to complete the surah until Surah An-Nas, and we hope that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes it easy. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ألم تر كيف فعل ربك بأصحاب الفيل ألم يجعل كيدهم في تضليل وأرسل عليهم طيرا أبابيل ترميهم بحجارة من سجيل فجعلهم كعصف مأكول. بسم الله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. Surah Al-Fil, very short surah. We all know the story, but long context and important context. Yemen used to be a very important center for trade and for commerce and for power. And Yemen lost that centrality when Mecca became the center for the Arabs and became a religious center. When the Quraysh took advantage of the fact that this is the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they made it a safe haven for people to come and basically trade, it became very prosperous for people to come and to sell. You know, at the time of the Arabs, one of the biggest concern was lack of safety. If you didn't have the right people to protect your caravan, you would be done. But if you're able to gather your money or your caravan in Mecca, you would be able to engage freely. No taxes, no tariffs to pay, and it's very safe because it's the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when the Meccans developed a reputation now as the new center for trade, the people in Yemen became very, very concerned. Like, we used to be the center of trade and now we lost it. So one of the ways that they tried to regain that centrality was by launching a series of campaigns and wars against Mecca. And at the time there was a leader called Abraha, and he led those campaigns. And some stories say that he tried to justify this in many ways. And there's stories that were made up to justify. Whenever you have a war and you want to launch that war, there will be a real motivation for your war, but then there will be a story that you tell the media and the world to justify your intervention. So Abraha came up with this story of a bunch of Arabs that were visiting the commerce and trade centers in Yemen, and they saw this figure that looked like the Kaaba. And this was an attempt of Abraha to regain the centrality. Abraha said, okay, the reason why Meccans are successful is because they have this black cube called the Kaaba. We can build one too, and we'll tell people to come and worship. And ours is better because, you know, there's a Christian tradition here, a Jewish tradition here. So they built this black cube like the Kaaba, and they thought people would come, or actually a bunch of rocks, right? And people would come and worship. But it failed miserably because there was no story. And the Kaaba is not successful because it's the Kaaba. It's not the stones, it's the story of Ibrahim and the sacrifice. But to justify his attack, he said that we're not going to be able to succeed as long as the Meccan Kaaba is there, so we need to eliminate it. So he made up the story about a bunch of people who are Arabs who came from Mecca to this newly created cube, and they defecated in that cube, or urinated in that cube. So they basically showed disrespect. And so Abraha said, how can they do this? This is an ultimate act of disrespect, desecration of a valuable and important holy site for us. And so we're going to launch a campaign against them. And so they launched that campaign, and they were known for using elephants in the war. And we know the famous story of how when the Arabs were being attacked, they said, look, if you're coming to attack us, we'll fight you. But if you're coming to attack the house of Allah, we don't need to fight you. So sometimes this is actually painted as cowardly by the Arabs or by historians, that the Arabs decided they're not going to fight. It's not because they didn't want to fight. The Arabs had very hot blood. They would not let down an invitation for war. Right? Like, so you're inviting me to war, I'll fight you. I don't even need you to invite. I'm ready to fight you, whether you want to or not. But the reason why they didn't fight is because they said, we don't even need to. We know that God will protect His house. And it's the ultimate act of disrespect to you to show you that we don't even need to put up a resistance. You come. We're going to walk away. We're going to keep the doors open. You do your thing. And this was the decision by who? By the Meccans. So the Meccans decided they're not going to fight. But other Arabs didn't know. The news didn't reach them. So some other tribes, they actually decided to fight along the way. And they lost. They lost. But it's because the news did not reach them that the Meccans made a decision not to fight. Some modern historians will present the story differently. They will say that the reason why Meccans left is because they saw the defeat of the Arabs on the outside. Like, if the Arabs lost, then we're not going to put up a fight. Do your thing and whatever. Let them break the cube, we'll rebuild it. But the story that is usually told by the Arabs themselves, those who survive from Quraysh, if you go and you sit with the elders, they'll tell you, we made a decision, our elders made a decision not to fight because they knew that the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be protected. And also, there was another reason, and a very important business reason. If the Arabs fought in Mecca to protect the house, what would that do? It would break the sanctity of the safety of the Kaaba. So they wanted to show that they would be under no circumstances would there be any war happening in this house. And if somebody wanted to come and fight, we will actually let them be. You do your thing. You want to come and you want to ruin the Kaaba? We have so much, sanctity in the value of no blood to be shed in this place that we're just going to let you in. So this actually helped their case commercially, because it showed that the Arabs of Mecca under no circumstance will they fight around the Kaaba, and that made it absolutely certain now that this will be the safest place to do trade. So the attack of Abraha, even if it was successful, his mission to regain the commerce would have failed, because they were strategic enough to say, it's not worth the fight. It will ruin us in the future. And the same thing the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ eventually would do in Hudaybiyah. And we'll come to that in a second. Very important to know your history. Tamam? Now, what happened when the Arabs saw the attack? There's this famous story of Abu Talib, and it's mentioned almost every tafsir of the surah. In Muqatil, Abu Talib, he gets on his horse, Long story. He goes around the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, clears the animals, clears the camels, clears the horses, takes care of his own wealth. He locks it all up, and then he looks at the Kaaba, and people tell him, like, you're protecting your own wealth and your own crops and your own money, and you're locking it all, but you're leaving the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala like unsecure, unprotected. He said, as for my wealth, I'm responsible for it. As for the house, it's Allah's. He's responsible for it. He will protect it. And we know the story of how they came close. And as soon as they came, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent the birds. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أَلَمْ تَرَ كَيْفَ فَعَلَ رَبُّكَ بِأَصْحَابِ الْفِيلِ أَلَمْ يَجْعَلْ كَيْدَهُمْ فِي تَضْلِيلٍ وَأَرْسَلَ عَلَيْهِمْ طَيْرًا أَبَابِيلَ تَرْمِيهِمْ بِحِجَارَةٍ مِّن سِجِّيلٍ فَجَعَلَهُمْ كَعَصْفٍ مَأْكُولٍ. Did you not see, O Prophet, how your Lord dealt with the army of the elephants? Now this is very important. Was the Prophet alive to see? He wasn't alive to see. He was born in the year of the elephant. But the story is so vivid that if you lived at that time, it's as if you've seen it. It's told over and over with such dramatic detail, because this is the most defining moment for the Meccans in that era. That anybody who's living in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, or even born at the time, would know the story so well. You know the story that your grandfather said 10,000 times to you? Every time you sit, Beta, you know, mashallah, when I was 7 years old, Sheikh, wallahi, you know, you're like, but out of respect you nod, you're like, tell me more, mashallah, and you hear the story over and over again. So it's that story. It was so told over and over that it became the defining story in the history of Quraysh. أَلَمْ يَجْعَلْ كَيْدَهُمْ فِي تَضْلِيلٍ. Did Allah not ruin tadlil, dalal, lost? Did He not make their kaid, their plan, their concoction, their strategy fall apart, fail apart on two fronts? How did Allah do this? وَأَرْسَلَ عَلَيْهِمْ طَيْرًا أَبَابِيلَ. Allah sent birds, flocks of birds, ababil. Now if you think about ababil, in the Quran, the word is usually associated with a large number. This wasn't one or two, it was a large flock of birds. تَرْمِيهِمْ بِحِجَارَةٍ مِّن سِجِّيلٍ. That would basically pelt them with rocks made out of sijil. The scholars have different interpretations about what the sijil is. Modern scholars like to use the idea of virology. That it was basically a rock, okay, or like a stone, and it was baked. And the reason it was baked is because you had acid inside, and it would survive the pressure of the fall. But as soon as it hits somebody, the mud would break, and the acid would be released. And if it falls under anyone or on anyone, it would basically eat through the skin. So what happened to Abraha, for example, is he was attacked, and he was one of the few people that survived the original incident. So they took him back, they carried him back. But when he came back into Yemen, his body was completely like pus, like growing out of all, like gushing out of every part of his body. And he ended up dying amongst his people. So it sent a big loud message to the entire Arabian Peninsula. What is the message? The message was, do not mess with the Arabs, because this house is protected. Now imagine what kind of cred now you got on the street. What's the story you're going to tell now as a Qurayshi? We didn't even have to fight. God fought for us. And we planned it. We stayed in our homes. We had so much faith in God. We stuck to the commitment that we gave you Arabs, that we will never fight in this place. And now, if you try to mess with us, we got drones, man. We got Allah sending His acid. And of course you can imagine the Arabs dramatized this. Right? They dramatized this. They should have seen, like, it was like a birds, but of course the Arabs are not going to say it was birds. There were birds. There were butterflies. There were angels with arrows. There were, you had elephants. We had bigger elephants who had wings, and they were flying. They crushed your elephants. So the story that the Arabs, the Qurayshis made was a much more exaggerated version. So when this surah was revealed, the Arabs were upset. They're like, what do you mean? It was little flocks of birds and they just threw little rocks. No, that it was much bigger than that. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, no, Allah does it. And actually it works. It works against you. That Allah did not need to send, anything big. Allah sent birds. And those birds sent rocks, and the rocks were enough to destroy the army. And there's an important lesson for the Muslims to learn here, that Allah doesn't need us, guys. Allah doesn't need me or you. Allah doesn't need us. Allah used the earth to destroy Qarun. Allah used the fire to destroy, or the acid to destroy, the birds here to destroy. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala used mountains to crush people, Ad and Thamud. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala used water to drown Fir'aun. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can use anything to bring to justice the most unjust of civilizations and peoples. So when Allah invites us to be advocates of justice, it's not because He needs us, it's because we are being given the chance to showcase our iman, to showcase that we truly believe. You believe? Well, do something about it. You really have conviction, you really have justice as something that you hold as a value, show it. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us this temporary window in this dunya to showcase justice. And going back to Surah AlAsad, the scholars of Islam, they say that if there was a sixth pillar of Islam, what would the sixth pillar be? Al-amr bil-ma'ruf and nahy anil munkar. To command the good and to stop the evil. If there was a sixth pillar besides the shahada, the salah, the siyam, the zakah and the hajj, it would be al-amr bil-ma'ruf and nahy anil munkar. To command the good and to stop the evil. That's how important this principle is in Islam. And it comes with a lot of conditions that you cannot create more damage through your attempt to prevent damage. Right? It's very important as a condition. So sometimes people, there's injustice, just break injustice. But in the process you do so much more. It's like the example of somebody, a kid who saw a fly on another kid. Boom! Knocks the kid out. Why? There was a fly. You knocked the guy out to get rid of the fly? The fly nothing happened to the fly, but the kid got knocked out. This is an example of bad amr bil ma'ruf and nahy anil munkar. In trying to help somebody recognize their flaws, you hurt them, you injure them, you abuse them, you crush them, you ruin them. That's not done properly. But in any case, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala used these animals and this, like the pelted rocks here, to get rid of this army that came to attack the house. فَجَعَلَهُمْ كَعَصْفٍ مَأْكُولٍ. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala left them chewed up like straw. When you go to like a place where the animals have been grazed, what's left is that al-asf. The asf is the chewed up like crop that's gone. Imagine this, that's the body condition that they were in. Now, what this did for the Arabs, it reinforced their entitlement to being God's people. They spun this very well. They sent their poets everywhere. They're like, don't mess with the Quraysh. We have the house of God. And we must be truly believers. Why? Because God protected us. Because God took care of us. We must be good people because God took care of us. And if God is not taking care of us, we must not be good people. But they realized that that's not the equation, guys. Allah can give you to test you. And Allah can protect you, not because you deserve it, but because there's another plan. There's the house of Allah that is going to be purified of idolatry soon. Allah sent the Prophet already. He's born in the year of the elephants. So this became a symbol. The house of Allah was protected physically, but the house of Allah would be purified religiously and spiritually with the sending of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And that's connected to the next surah. We'll read this very carefully together, inshallah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم لإيلاف قريش إيلافهم رحلة الشتاء والصيف فليعبدوا رب هذا البيت الذي أطعمهم من جوع وآمنهم من خوف. If you want to see the love that Allah has, the mercy of Allah, read this ayah. Why did Allah send the elephants? Why did Allah protect the house? Why did Allah do all of that? Allah mentions the reason in this ayah. لِإِيلَافِ قُرَيْشٍ. What is ilaf? Ilaf, think about ulfa. What does ulfa mean? Who can tell me? What is ulfa? Familiarity, yeah? That's the word that's here for the familiarity, right? Close, that's a good, it's true, but it doesn't just mean that. What's ulfa? Yes? Tying things together. Maybe, yeah, sometimes used that way, but there's a greater meaning. Let me give you an example. What do we call a wild animal? What do we call a wild animal? Huh? A predator in Arabic. وحش أو حيوان مفترس. What do we call the حيوان المفترس when he becomes tamed? أليف. Alif refers to the taming of an animal. Ya Allah, let this sink in, let this sink in. Ulfa. How do you tame an animal, by the way? How do you tame an animal, guys? How do you tame an animal? What do you do to tame an animal? Yeah. Feeding. What else do you do? Affection, love, care, nurturing. So it's as if this animal has a nature of being wild, but you can overcome that nature by doing what? By showing love. So as if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying about the Arabs, you're so wild, you're so aggressive, you're so hot-tempered and so just arrogant, that the only way you would have been tamed is if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala were to protect His house. That you would have caused so much anger and damage if you had fought, if there was no intervention. So much more damage would have been done, that Allah protected His house to prevent you from showing that wilderness within you. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did that also to express His love for you. Ulfa, that He actually did this to express His love for you. So it's read in both ways. You can imagine who's going to read that first reading? The Persian Mufassirun. The Persian Mufassirun are going to paint the Arabs in an aggressive way. The Arab Mufassirun, what are they going to say? They're going to say, لِإِلَافِ قُرَيْشٍ, it's Allah showing His love and allowing them to be familiar with His love before the justice would be served. And both readings are possible. We're unbiased here. We'll read the critical, Arabic critical and Persian critical version. طيب? Now, لِإِلَافِ قُرَيْشٍ, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is demonstrating the ulfa, relationship and love. لِإِلَافِ قُرَيْشٍ إِلَافِهِمْ. That love that Allah showed them, allowed them to sustain 2 journeys, in the summer and in the winter. Why did it sustain 2 journeys? Because what could they say now? They could travel from Mecca to Yemen, and from Mecca to Syria, the north and the south. When are they going to go south? In the winter, because it's hot. And when are they going to north? In the summer. These guys are chilling. They have to do 2 trips in the year. And they're able to sustain their entire trade system. Because as they're going north, they're meeting all these tribes and they're telling them, we're able to carry this big caravan and bring all of this to you and bring it back to Mecca, and no one can mess with us. Why? Because we're the Quraysh. We have the house of Allah. Birds, don't forget it. So now they have the street cred. They can go anywhere and trade anywhere. And it reinforces the notion that Mecca is the safest place to do trade. And Yemen gets crushed because of this. And if you look at why Yemen went through, during this time, Yemen went through years of poverty and drought and famine, such a difficult position. And that also collides with the history of the Jewish persecution of Christians and the Christian revival. There's so much history in this region that you actually need to take it up and see what's going on. And so the Jewish persecutors that were persecuting the Christians, they were punished savagely by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for this persecution. And the vice versa, the other way around is true. It kept, Yemen kept rotating between Jews who would come and they would persecute the Christians, and Christians would come and persecute the Jewish communities. And in the middle of all this, Mecca emerges, benefits from this constant struggle for power, and becomes the new center of trade. Now the historians who don't believe in Allah, and they're looking for material explanations, just material explanations, will highlight all of this and will say, this is how Mecca came to power, this is how Rasulullah succeeded. He used all of this because it was already available. He used the notion, he saw the notion of the house of Allah, and he could build an entire system around it. But then the next surah will prove that wrong. Because what's the next surah going to say? يَا أَيُّهَا الْكَافِرُونَ أَعْبُدُ مَا تَعْبُدُونَ وَأَنْتُمْ عَابِدُونَ مَا أَعْبُدُ. I'm not going to worship what you worship. You will never worship what I worship. It's not about unity. It's not about just uniting for the sake of the house. There's much more. It's about tawheed. It's amazing that the flow of the surah is incredible. To deny the notion that it's just an equation for success. It's a material equation. Because there's a lot more going on that is immaterial. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is reminding them, I'm the one who protected your house. I'm the one who allowed the wilderness in you to be tamed. I'm the one who gave all of this to you. The least you can do is, if you're benefiting from the house of Allah, is to worship the Lord of the house. فَلْيَعْبُدُوا رَبَّ هَذَا الْبَيْتِ الَّذِي أَطْعَمَهُم مِّن جُوعٍ وَآمَنَهُم مِّن خَوْفٍ. The one who allowed them to eat in times of hunger and to be safe in times of fear. What's happening to your south? Yemen is hungry. What's happening to your north? The Sham is hungry. But you have all the food that you could imagine. What's happening to the left of you, to the right of you, to the north, to the south of you? Wars among tribes, wars. What's happening in the Sham? Who can tell me what's happening in the Sham at this time? There's this constant struggle between the Persian Empire, the Roman Empire, the Byzantine Empire, and the Sasanian Empire. They're fighting. So the people of the Sham, what do you do? What do you do when you're constantly juggling between this power and this power? You can't survive in the environment. So you have a Persian, Byzantine fight for power at the north. You have a Christian, Jewish fight for power in the south. And you're right there protected because of the house. Have some shame and worship the Lord of the house. Who is this Lord of the house? الَّذِي أَطْعَمَهُم مِّن جُوعٍ وَآمَنَهُم مِّن خَوْفٍ. Subhanallah. And this ayah applies today, till this day. Think about, Somalia, and I'm going to be blatant here and respectful. Somalia used to send aid to the Hijaz. Do you guys know that? 50 years ago, Somalia used to send aid, food, to the Hijaz, to Mecca, Medina, because there was a struggle. Maybe not 80 years ago now. There was a struggle. Oil changed the world. Look at the Hijaz now. Look at the Gulf. Just a few years ago, a couple of decades ago. Now, do you think, same thing, like Allah gives you this natural resource, you did nothing to deserve it. And this natural resource makes that region one of the richest regions in the world. Like if you look at that region and combine it, the amount of natural resources, the amount of money and wealth in that region is ridiculous. So imagine if a surah like this were to reveal today, if the Prophet Muhammad were to speak to the community of today, what would he say? Allah has given you this natural resource, so worship the Lord of the natural resource. Till this day, Mecca enjoys safety that nobody can enjoy. Nobody would dare attack Mecca or Medina. Why? Because 1.9 billion people in the world, Muslim or not Muslim. The guy who's at the nightclub doesn't care about Islam implemented. If he hears that Mecca or Medina is being attacked, he'll become a jihadi overnight. Let's be. Nobody dares with Mecca, Medina. Syria, whatever. Yemen, whatever. Iraq, whatever. Egypt, okay, who cares? They have enough people. But Mecca, Medina, don't mess. And that's why there's a lot of, the stakeholders in the region know that. They're not going to mess politically with that region. They're going to invest in a relationship of that region. With them, they're not going to try to do coups and whatnot and cause chaos in that region, because you can't mess. You got to have stability in that region. Muslims are hot-headed, hot-tempered, and they don't think clearly. Mecca, Medina is a border, like clear line. But the third Qibla, Khair. Subhanallah. So that region enjoys so much safety and security and prosperity. You can imagine this ayah being applicable to them. Let them worship the Lord of this house. فَلْيَعْبُدُوا رَبَّ هَذَا الْبَيْتِ. Let them worship the Lord of these resources. And I'm not saying that, of course, everybody in that region or part of the world is implicated in injustice. I'm just saying that there is injustice in that part of the world. And as I say that as I'm about to travel there tomorrow. Allahumma musta'an. Khair inshallah. The next surah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reveals Surah Al-Ma'un. Let's read it together and discuss the meanings. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أرأيت الذي يكذب بالدين فذلك الذي يدع اليتيم ولا يحض على طعام المسكين فويل للمصلين الذين هم عن صلاتهم ساهون الذين هم يراءون ويمنعون الماعون. The surah is incredible because it was revealed. Al-Kalbi and Muqatil, the Mufassirun, say that it was revealed regarding Al-As ibn Wa'il al-Sahli, and Ibn Jurayj says it was revealed regarding Sufyan ibn Harb. Abu Sufyan, the leader, his father, Sufyan. Now, this surah describes another trope, another character. And it's all connected. Again, Juz Amma is all connected. This surah describes the person like Abu Sufyan, like Sufyan or Al-As, who when it was Mecca Hajj season, when it was the Hajj season, they would slaughter hundreds of animals to feed the guests. But when a poor person came to ask in private, or when an orphan came to ask, they would be what? They would be turned away, and they would be turned away aggressively. Get out of here. And when somebody else would try to help, they would say, why would you do that? That's a waste of your resources. So I don't get it. How do you have the dual facedness? How do you have those two faces? Where you're donating hundreds, millions of dollars, but at the same time you're showing absolute lack of care for the disenfranchised in your community. How? Because it's not for Allah. It's not genuine. It's for the sake of the image. In order for me to qualify my right to rule in Mecca, I have to show my piety. People are going to revolt against me if they don't see me doing pious work. So what I do is I distract the community with my philanthropy, with my construction projects, so that they have no choice but to accept my acts of injustice. Or I do that because that qualifies my right to rule. Abu Sufyan or Sufyan and Al-As, they really beat a lot of slaves up, and they abuse children, abuse women. Yeah, but look at they donate a lot of money, don't they? Yeah, okay, there's good in them. Maybe you're right, maybe there's good in them. I saw them whip the slave. It was really bad. It was really hurtful. Yeah, but look at they decorated the Kaaba. They expanded the Kaaba, didn't they? Expansion projects. It's a lot of work. They can't be that bad. So the good that is done becomes justification or distraction. Allahu A'lam what the intentions are. But at least in this surah, we know from the tafsir that was describing an attitude of the leaders of Quraysh. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, shall I tell you then who truly denies the core of this deen? And what is deen, by the way? Deen, like Yawm al-Deen and Madinun, right? It means the thing that you owe to Allah. Like think about dayn, a loan. So deen is what you owe to Allah for the gift that He's given you. Allah gave you the gift of life. You have to show gratitude for that. If somebody gives you $1,000, if I come to you right now and write you a check for $10,000 here, you're going to treat me in a certain way. Because you appreciate that. If I write you a check for life, if I give you like a heart when you're struggling, or eyes when you're going to owe me your life. Because that's the nature of human beings. We show gratitude. What about the one who gave us the eyes and the ears and life and attitude, everything that we have? Do we not owe Allah something? So what is it that we owe Allah? The deen. That's what we owe Allah. This way of life. This religion is what we owe Allah. The prayer is our rent. The zakah is the rent that we pay to Allah to show gratitude. So the things that He asked us to do, that is what we do to show Allah gratitude. Does Allah benefit? No, it's us that benefit. But He's asked us, so it's respectful to obey what He told us to do, even if it does not benefit Him in any shape or form. It benefits us. So Allah is saying, shall I tell you about the one who denies that deen, the core of this faith, the core of that loan, that relationship, all the good that he's done, you deny it. And ad-deen could also be referring to Yawm ad-Deen, that day in which the ultimate loan has to be paid back. It's all connected. The ultimate loan, gift of life, is taken back. Now you have to pay. You stand in front of Allah. That's why it's called Yawm-ud-Din, the day of resurrection. I gave you life from this point to this point. Now you stand in front of me and I ask you what you did with that life. What did you do with that time? What did you do with that youth? What did you do with that energy? What did you do with the money? What did you do with all that I gave you? How did you earn it? How did you spend it? Yawm-ud-Din. So Allah says, فَذَلِكَ الَّذِي يَدُعُّ الْيَتِيمِ. You want to know whether you truly are believing or not? The one who doesn't believe in this deen is the one who يَدُعُّ. يَوْمَ, like يَدُعُّ is to basically push away, turn away. يَدُعُّ الْيَتِيمِ, repulses the orphan. You know, some of the Mufassirun here say, repulsing the orphan is not about, wallahi, this is so powerful. I want you to listen to this carefully. I don't know if we're going to be able to get through the whole juz, but I'd rather, inshallah, whatever we don't finish, we can finish after, come back, inshallah, from Umrah. May Allah accept, Ya Rabbi, keep us in your dua. But it's important to get through the quality at least, to understand some of these lessons, because they're very important. فَذَلِكَ الَّذِي يَدُعُّ الْيَتِيمِ. The one who repulses the orphan is not necessarily the one who beats the orphan, turns away from the orphan, tells the orphan, get out of here. Is the one who puts obstacles that the orphan has to climb that makes it difficult to ask for help. So you institutionally, you make it so difficult to ask that people don't want to ask. Some of the Mufassirun say here, to make people line up publicly to ask for help, that's a form of like repulsion. To make people have to fill out pages and pages and pages of justification. I've had this told to me. Like, bro, it's easier to file like taxes for a corporation that has millions and millions of dollars of assets than it is to ask for zakah from this masjid. I'm not talking about Isna, because we don't give zakah. We send it to another institution. Right? And I'm not picking at any institution, but these are questions that we have to ask. Have we designed systems in place that make it difficult for people to access? And is that a form of repelling people? So فَذَلِكَ الَّذِي يَدُعُّ الْيَتِيمِ وَلَا يَحُضُّ عَلَى طَعَامِ الْمِسْكِينِ, and does not encourage the feeding of the poor. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, if you don't encourage the feeding of the poor, you don't have true understanding of the deen. You deny the deen. It's not only to not do it, it's to not encourage it. To not encourage it. فَذَلِكَ وَلَا يَحُضُّ عَلَى طَعَامِ الْمِسْكِينِ. And hadd is what? To actually encourage with passion. If you're not standing passionately to encourage the feeding of others, to encourage justice for others, you do not truly believe in this deen. Ya Allah. Can you imagine? فَوَيْلٌ لِلْمُصَلِّينَ. You want to see also another sign of this person who doesn't truly believe? What a terrible punishment for those who pray, but when they're praying, their minds, listen to this carefully, in between their prayer, they're distracted, or they push and they delay their prayer. Now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't say الَّذِينَ هُمْ فِي صَلَاتِهِمْ سَاهُونَ, because that would have meant all of us are destroyed. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not talking about they're not able to fully focus on the salah, because none of us are going to focus on the salah. He's talking about those who don't focus on prioritizing their salah. They keep pushing. So it's time to pray, but they say, yeah, I'll do it later. So they delay their salah. They're not mindful when it comes to their salah, prioritizing it. Some people rotate their whole schedule around the salah. And I'm not talking about exceptions, like when you're traveling and when you have the rukhsah, it's fine. I'm talking about constantly. You're delaying asr, you're delaying dhuhr. You pray at the last minute. You combine for no reason. You pray fajr after sunrise. Like all of this is like signs of being distracted, not taking the salah seriously. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about why this happens. The people who do all of this, الَّذِينَ هُمْ يُرَاءُونَ, they are the ones that show off. وَيَمْنَعُونَ الْمَاعُونَ, and they stop the simplest act of good. So they show off when it's salah, when it's Ramadan time and everybody in the masjid, that's when they pray their best. Now there's a difference here. I have to qualify that. Because sometimes you pray better when you see a lot of other people praying because you're encouraged. You're like, hey, everybody's doing it. I can do it too. Allahu Akbar. Let me do it. That's fine. But what we're talking about is, this is the biggest gathering of Muslims. If I'm trying to get into power for the next 5 years, I really need to be noticed in this prayer. So I will come early, the Eid Salah, I'll come early, I'll line up at the very front, I'll have that perfect musalla. Allahu Akbar. My ruku' is going to be on point, my sujood is going to be on point. Okay, I have my team of experts who are looking at exactly at the camera angles. The camera is going to be pointing this way. Or I'm going to go to the camera person and be like, hey, you've been very good. Here's a $500 tip. You didn't say anything. Like, people like you, camera people, you guys work so hard, you'll get recognition. Here's $500. Now, what is that camera person thinking? Oh my God, this person's so nice, this person's so nice. Subconsciously, what are they doing? Oh, look at their mashallah. I want the whole world to see. I've seen this happen with my own eyes. Muslim politicians, when it was I've seen them in private, they don't pray. They rarely pray. But because that large gathering, cameras are around, they will start giving out that money and they will start, mashallah. I'm not questioning everybody's intention, but I'm saying some people do it this way. And you know that, politicians, especially who don't believe in anything, for them it's numbers, for them it's polls, it's acceptance, it's, popularity. They need to be seen doing something. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, they are the ones that show off. And we talked about the hadith of showing off. That the first 3 people that are going to be, or the first 3 categories of people that will be punished, thrown into Jahannam, actually the Jahannam will be fueled by them. The scholar, the martyr, and the wealthy who did it, not for the sake of Allah, but did it for the sake of recognition. You did it so that people can call you smart, you did it so people can call you brave, you did it so people can call you excellent, great knowledge. And they will do all this, but when it comes to the smallest act of good, they will refuse it. When it's in private. Like a little kid will come, knocking on the door of Sufyan, and he will tell his wife, don't open. Don't, just asking for a piece of food. It's not going to cost anything. And then he will talk to his wife and tell her, it's not the piece of food. It's what you are going to train these people to do. Because once you give them once, they'll come back tomorrow in tens. Once you give them once, they will know that this is a place to give. Now, how are we going to ever leave the house? How are we ever going to get... So you see, they'll find ways to justify their lack of generosity. They'll rationalize it. Rationalize the people that they love and the people that love them. I'm doing this for us. Right? We cannot get people to be dependent on our giving. Why? Because then they're not going to get a job. But what about building systems in place to empower them? What about giving them the money but giving them a job and work to do? What about building an No. Because then people are going to become so lazy. Well, what about creating programs that train them not to be so lazy? Like, who's got time for that? What? We got to babysit everybody? We got bigger issues to solve. Like what? Like spending $1 billion on nuclear weapons. Okay. I think we get the point. Next surah, Surah Al-Kawthar. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم إنا أعطيناك الكوثر فصل لربك وانحر إن شانئك هو الأبتر. Again, a very powerful surah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaking to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam here. And he tells Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, indeed we have granted you al-Kawthar. Compare the surah to Surah Al-Takathur. Surah Al-Takathur talks about being distracted with the illusion of good that you end up not doing what is actually good for you. And in doing so, you attain nothing but useless outcomes. You're distracted by what you think is good for you, that you don't actually get what is good for you. Here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala addresses Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and he tells him, we have given you al-Kawthar. Al-Kawthar is the plural form of good, both in quality and quantity. We have given you the good in as many ways as possible, and we've given you the good in as much quality as possible. So there are scholars who read this surah to refer to the river in Jannah. Like Anas, he says, I was with Rasulullah sallam in Medina when he closed his eyes like this, as if he was napping. And he woke up with a big smile on his face. And he read the surah. And I understood from that the surah was revealed to him. Inna a'tainaka al-kawthar, that we've given you all the good. And he described that the Kawthar is a river in Jannah. Which is, I want you to understand why Anas would say that this surah is revealed in Medina. He thinks Prophet ﷺ closed his eyes and he received the surah that way. Did the Prophet ﷺ say that? No. People who were there in Mecca heard the surah in Mecca. So the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ probably closed his eyes, some of the students say, and looked down because he was remembering. So difficult, you know when you go through difficult moments and you want to reaffirm yourself, you want to reassure yourself. So he closed his eyes to think, Allah has given me so much. Allah has given me so much. I need to keep going. I need to keep going. And that's when he recited the surah. But for Anas, it was the first time that he heard it. Because Anas is a kid in Medina, 10 years of age. And he spends 10 years with the Prophet ﷺ. So from 7 to 17 or to 20 years of age is when he spends time with Rasulullah ﷺ. But he wasn't there for the Meccan era. But a lot of the people who were there early on will tell you that the surah was around in Mecca. So that's why you have to think about, when you see different people saying it's a Meccan surah, it's a Medina surah, you have to think about the context. So that's why Anas, is very important, thinks that the surah is talking only about the river in Jannah that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ Allah gave to the Prophet ﷺ as a reward for all of the sacrifice and all the investment. But if you look at someone like Ibn Abbas, who's Ibn Abbas? He's the father of Al-Abbas. Who's Al-Abbas? The uncle of Rasulullah ﷺ. This is a Qurayshi. He knows a lot of the ins. He knows a lot of the Meccan history, even though he was young. He's of the opinion, no, it doesn't refer to only the river. He says it refers to all of the good that Allah has given Rasulullah ﷺ, and among that good is the river in Jannah. Al-Kawthar refers to all of the good. Al-Kawtharu ashya'un kathira, including the river that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ in Jannah. Now what's amazing is he was asked, Ibn Abbas was asked, can you tell us what is that good referring to? He says, it's the life that Allah gave to Rasulullah. It's the struggles that Allah gave to Rasulullah ﷺ. It's the sacrifices they had to go through, the difficult moments. All of that made the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ who he is. So he's of the opinion that the fact that the Rasul ﷺ was an orphan was good for him because that allowed him to understand the struggle of the orphans. The fact that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ experienced that poverty or that difficult boycott for a year and a half, 16 months, that was good for him. So his whole life was good for him because it allowed for good to come out of it. And the end, one of the rewards that he gets in Jannah is that river in Jannah. So do you understand? Comparing the good that people pursue. Like people think if I live a comfortable life and a privileged life, that's really good for me. So I'm pursuing comfort and privilege and happiness, or I'm chasing comfort, ease. I want more, comforters. I want a better mattress. I want a better house, thinking that that's what's going to give me happiness. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed the surah to tell the Prophet ﷺ that Allah has already given you all that is good, even your tests and trials and difficulties and challenges. They're good for you because they lead to ultimate ease in this dunya and in the akhirah. Now what do you do to show that gratitude? You know how Allah told Quraysh, I gave you that comfort, safety. I made you full at a time when everybody's hungry. فَلْيَعْبُدُوا رَبَّ هَذَا الْبَيْتِ. So worship the Lord of this house. The same thing is being told to the Prophet ﷺ. فَصَلِّ لِرَبِّكَ وَانْحَرْ. Then pray to your Lord and sacrifice. Give back. So for us, listen to this carefully. The Eid al-Adha is not about killing as many animals as possible and letting that food go to waste. It's not about, the act itself. Yeah, even though that's important to follow the ritual exactly the Prophet ﷺ did. There's a purpose behind it, which is to show gratitude to Allah. فَصَلِّ لِرَبِّكَ وَانْحَرْ. Right? Just like we worship in a certain way, we sacrifice in a certain way to implement the sunnah, but the reason for that is to actually benefit people, to serve the people, and to show gratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because He's the one who gave it to us. So we use it. You understand the fact that Allah gave you that wealth and you choose to give it, that in itself is a sacrifice. So it's your way of demonstrating gratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Inna shani'aka huwa al-abtar. Indeed, your enemy is the one that will be cut off. This is referring to, if you look at the context, it's referring to either Abu Jahl, Al-As ibn Wa'il al-Sahli, or Ka'b ibn al-Ashraf, who, when the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ lost a child, either in Mecca or in Medina, Abdullah in Mecca, Ibrahim in Medina, when he lost that child, those three people were from those who abused him and used that grief to hurt him even more. They came and said, oh, the Prophet lost a child. No man will live to carry his name. So he will die and his legacy will die with him. In Mecca, it was Ka'b ibn al-Ashraf who came on a visit. It was Abu Jahl, Anas, Al-As ibn Wa'il. All of them said it. But Ka'b also said it again, perhaps, in Medina when the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ lost his second son. Which is why the scholars have, again, a difference of opinion on what this is a Meccan surah or Medinan surah. But I don't see an issue. Because the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ lost a son twice. So the people who said it the first time would easily say it the second time. Actually, even more. And Ka'b was alive for the second time. So that's why some say that it was a Medinan surah, even though the stronger opinion is it's a Meccan surah. So they said, oh look, the Prophet lost his only son, Abdullah. See, the gods are unhappy. See, Allah doesn't even want him to have a legacy. And if God doesn't want him to have a biological legacy, his legacy too will die, because God is not happy. Our gods are not happy with this. So the surah was revealed, Inna shani'aka huwa al-abtar. Your enemy is the one that will be cut off. Now, if you look at the books of tafsir, and this is very important, some books of tafsir say, and there was a fourth person that said these things about Rasulullah ﷺ and mocked him, but his name did not survive. And the early mufassirun chose to dismiss his name as an act of showing respect to the ayah. That Allah said, your enemy will be the one that is cut off, so we're going to eliminate, we're going to cut out his name. And the stronger opinion among the mufassirun, it was probably that guy. But we don't know his name. Because his name is irrelevant. Because Allah said that his name would not survive, and his name did not survive. But what did survive is the legacy of Rasulullah ﷺ. That his name would be mentioned. There's no son. There's no one that can say, I was the son of Rasulullah ﷺ and I had children, I lived to have children. His lineage, survives through Hassan and Fatima. Through Ali ibn Abi Talib and Fatima. Hassan, Hussein, Muhammad ibn al-Hanafi as the second son, but that's not even the legacy of Rasulullah ﷺ. Ahlul Bayt, from proximity wise, Al-Abbas, long distance, but Hassan and Hussein, right, as those children that would survive. Now, if you look at Rasulullah ﷺ's legacy, though, it survived in many ways. His name is said in the adhan, his name is said in the iqamah, even in the janazah when you pray in the salah at the end of the tashahhud. SubhanAllah, how many times every day do you say Rasulullah's name? Think about it. Every time his name is mentioned, you send salawat. Like that's Kawthar. That's the form of Kawthar. So when Ibn Abbas says Al-Kawthar refers to all the good, because there's so much good that you can't even limit it to one thing. There's so much good that the Prophet ﷺ is given by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that you cannot limit it to one thing. So this is Surah Al-Kawthar. Let's move on to Surah Al-Kafirun. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. قل يا أيها الكافرون لا أعبد ما تعبدون ولا أنتم عابدون ما أعبد ولا أنا عابد ما عبدتم ولا أنتم عابدون ما أعبد لكم دينكم ولي الدين. There are two surahs in the Quran that are called Surah Al-Ikhlas. You know that? قل هو الله أحد and Al-Kafirun. So some of us didn't know this, but Nabi ﷺ and the companions used to call this surah Surah Al-Ikhlas. And if you look at the early manuscripts, they named this surah Surah Al-Ikhlas. The two are called Surah Al-Ikhlas because both of them talk about what? Talk about the concept of having pure tawheed. One talks about, one is a message to the kuffar, this one, and one is a message to some of the Ahlul Kitab that have, they think they have tawheed, but it's twisted tawheed. So one addresses Trinity and one addresses, or those who associate with Allah certain beings, and those who associate with Allah certain objects. And both are important. So this surah is also known as Al-Ikhlas. And the surah, there's a hadith also that says this surah is considered to be a fourth of the Quran. You know, Surah Al-Ikhlas, Surah Qul Huwallahu Ahad, is known to be a third of the Quran. This surah is considered to be a fourth of the Quran. And the Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam used to recite this surah often, in witr, sometimes in the sunnah after tawaf. When you're in the house of Allah, you recite these two surahs, Al-Ikhlas and Kafirun. Why? Because it's the height of Tawheed. I'm here in this house of Allah to demonstrate Tawheed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So keep that in mind. So let's break this down. The context here is Quraysh came to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and said, listen, we recognize now that you're powerful, that your message has value, that people are listening to you. So let's collaborate. We'll worship your God 1 year and you'll worship our God 1 year. Others said, okay, maybe 1 year is too much, we'll do half. Before the Hajj season, we'll be dedicated to your God. After the Hajj season, we'll be dedicated to our God. And we'll flip. One Hajj season will be completely Allah. No other gods allowed. We'll take them out. The other Hajj season, all gods will come out. So that way you benefit and we benefit. A plus. Great thinking. Because they think about money. More gods, more money. You get your Tawheed, Muslims come, you do your thing, and we get our shirk next day. This is like, some people have this attitude nowadays. They ask the question of, how can I be Christian, Jewish, Muslim, Buddhist, Hindu, all at the same time? Actually, I met people like this. I met one guy, he came and he prayed with us. I think it was like Isha Salah. And he was crying, and I met him, sat with him afterwards. He was like, I love Islam so much. It's so beautiful, mashallah. I thought, mashallah, this guy, like, so much iman, so much nur on his face. And he's like, mashallah, my week consists of me praying at the synagogue on Saturday, the church on Sunday, going to the temple on Thursday, visiting, because I love to connect with God in as many ways as possible. But ya Habibi, like, do you understand, like, the implication? Like, you cannot believe that God has a son, but He does not have a son. You cannot believe that you cannot worship an animal, but you can worship an animal. Like, he's like, yeah, I don't get into the abstract stuff. I just get into the moment. When I'm in that moment, I'm 100% Muslim. When I'm in that moment, I'm 100% Christian. When I'm in that moment, I'm 100% Jewish. I'm like, how does that make sense? He's like, the way that I explain it is, you know how Christians say God is fully man and fully God at the same time? I am fully Muslim, fully Christian, fully Jewish at the same time. I'm like, you understand, you just used an analogy that I don't believe in to make a statement that doesn't make sense to me. But it's khair, habibi. You do you, inshallah. May Allah guide you. And I'm sure you've seen, like, there are lots of these people, by the way. They're not like one or two or three. I'm sure in my, like, you've come across a bunch of them. Even the MSA, like, I remember, like, McMaster, there were a few of them, right? But Islam is so uncompromising from the very beginning. قُلْ يَا أَيُّهَا الْكَافِرُونَ. They're coming to Rasulullah with this proposal. And imagine Abu Talib is so excited. Abu Talib goes to Rasulullah and he's so happy. He's like, you won't believe it. Meccans agreed to collaborate. You should be so happy. You're finally going to be safe. You're finally going to have your people able to enter Mecca and do as you wish. The abuse will be gone. The Islamophobia will be gone. We'll have treaties in place to respect that. And Rasulullah starts reciting, tell them, قُلْ يَا أَيُّهَا الْكَافِرُونَ لَا أَعْبُدُ مَا تَعْبُدُونَ. Oh, you polytheists. Like, kafirun is not a nice word to say to, like, people that are coming to collaborate. You run around and say, you kafirun. La a'budu ma ta'budun. I do not worship what you worship now. وَلَا أَنْتُمْ عَابِدُونَ مَا أَعْبُدُ, and you do not worship what I worship now. وَلَا أَنَا عَابِدٌ مَا عَبَدْتُمْ, and I will not worship what you worship ever. وَلَا أَنْتُمْ عَابِدُونَ مَا أَعْبُدُ, and if you continue to think this way, you will never worship what I worship ever. لَكُمْ دِينُكُمْ وَلِيَ دِينِ. You have your deen, remember the definition of deen? You have your way of expressing your loyalty and gratitude to Allah, and I have my way of expressing gratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I have my religion, my way of firmly connecting with Him, but your way will never be accepted. Now this is in the middle of Meccan era. Like, this is a time in which if you were a social reformer looking to unite the Arabs, you would jump on the opportunity. You wouldn't go around like, it's such a, it's such a huge dynamic of power. The Quraysh recognized the potential, but Rasulullah didn't have many followers. The Mufassirun say around this time, he had 100 people with him max. Between like 46 to 97 people. Those are the Mufassirun say. So how are you as Quraysh going to offer this to Rasulullah who is not like 97 people max, 96 people maximum? And then he's going to turn around and be like, no, I'm not going to negotiate. Thank you, but no thank you. Can you imagine how Quraysh must have been fuming? Fuming. And Abu Talib was so upset. He's like, please reconsider, this is so important. He's like, you don't get it. And it starts with qul, say, to make it clear, I'm not the one saying this, I'm being told to say it by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If it was up to me, I would have collaborated, but Allah is so clear that there's no way. What's the proof of this? The fact that the Prophet Muhammad in his heart, he was thinking, maybe one day they would accept, could this be it? But Allah affirmed him, don't even think about it for once. In Surah Al-Isra, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَوْلَا أَن ثَبَّتْنَاكَ لَقَدْ كِدْتَ تَرْكَنُ إِلَيْهِمْ شَيْئًا قَلِيلًا. Had it not been for Allah giving you that steadfastness, you would have inclined to them even a little. Sometimes we as Muslims think that, like maybe this is what's good. Maybe it's better to like have this sort of like Abrahamic religion that has everything put together. Take a bit of Quran, a bit of Bible, a bit of Torah, a bit of Tanakh and Mishnah, put everything together, get a little bit of some of the Buddhist texts in there, create a new world religion that will bring everybody together. Wait a second, they tried that, didn't they? No need to mention specific, but think about the new religions that have popped up in the 19th and 20th centuries, right? Think about like the mainstream Baha'i community. That's what they claim. Like we're bringing everything together. It's great. Like we just want world peace between everybody. So we believe in the mixing of the three. And of course we say that respectfully. We're criticizing ideas, not people, right? لَكُمْ دِينُكُمْ وَلِيَ دِينُ. So powerful. And this shows you that a Muslim, when it comes to aqeedah, we do not compromise. When it comes to aqeedah, we do not compromise. There are clear aqeedah boundaries that must be respected. But when it comes to respect and collaboration, social issues, we do that. The Prophet Muhammad signed a contract with the same kuffar that he's criticizing. He signed Hudaybiyah. He signed business treaties with them. He signed a ceasefire with them. He signed a treaty with the Jewish community that the Quran criticized the Aqidah. He opened his masjid to the Christian community when they visited. So you understand, Muslims are both so respectful to people, because that's what Islam teaches, but so protective over theological boundaries, because that's what Islam teaches. And sometimes people will try to skew the two, or skew in one direction. You have to go along to get along. You have to compromise a little bit of Islam. You can't be fully Muslim. It doesn't make sense. You got to give up a little bit of you. And that's why, subhanAllah, guys, wallahi, this is true. Do you know that the early Muslims who came here in the 70s, because of the social pressure, I know imams or people who took imam positions in Canada who gave the fatwa that it's okay to drink alcohol, so that you're not left out. The early physicians who came to this country, because the medical school system was so rooted in the social environment and the pressure to drink, that if you left out on those networking opportunities, you'd be doomed, you'd be gone. So that they said that it's out of obligation, you would have to drink in these settings, and Allah will forgive you. That people will not understand the fact that you cannot eat pork, so it's okay to eat pork. Those compromises were made, and now we look back at them like, what? How is that even possible? And I wonder what compromises are we making today that the generation for tomorrow will come back and be like, really, did the early Muslims really do this? Did they really, were they so weak in their understanding or so pressured by the societal pressure that they succumb to this level? So be careful of theological boundaries. But at the same time, the theological boundaries that Allah tells us to protect have to be expressed in rahmah, ihsan, on the ground. Because Allah says, وَلَا تُجَادِلُ أَهْلِ الْكِتَابِ إِلَّا بِالَّتِي أَحْسَنُ لا ينهاكم الله عن الذين يقاتلوكم في الدين ولم يخرجوكم من دياركم أن تبروهم وتقسطوا إليهم. Allah does not stop you from showing birr, common courtesy and loyalty and respect to those who share different values, as long as they did not fight you in your deen and as long as they did not kick you out of your homes. But the minute somebody comes and displaces me from my home or persecutes me because of my deen, my faith, I have every right to defend my life and my values of my Islam to my last breath. Because if I don't have beliefs that I stand for, I'm worth nothing. And these are the beliefs that I stand for as a Muslim. So keep that in mind. Next surah quickly, we have maybe like a few minutes inshallah. We'll finish complete with Surah An-Nasr. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم إذا جاء نصر الله والفتح ورأيت الناس يدخلون في دين الله أفواجا فسبح بحمد ربك واستغفره إنه كان توابا. This surah is very powerful, but I'm going to try to condense so we can finish in 5 minutes, inshallah, so that we can pray Isha at 10:30. This surah, I believe, is sandwiched in these surah because it has a very important theme that connects everything together. But it's the last surah, full surah of the Quran to be revealed. The last full surah of the Quran to be revealed. Which makes it probably a Medinan surah, if like an early Medinan surah. Or some say that it happened, probably revealed at the time of the Fath. But Allah knows best. Now, you can imagine when the Prophet Muhammad was told to say this to the kuffar, I will not worship what you worship, you'll never worship what I worship. No, we clearly have differences and we'll never compromise. You can imagine he felt very what? Very like what's going to happen? So this surah contains the meanings that were given to Rasulullah to assert him and affirm him in that time. That there will come a day in which Allah will give you victory and Allah will allow you to enter Mecca and open Mecca. It's like it's closed. You know when doors are closed in your face? The door of the Kaaba is closed. You're not allowed to enter, but Allah will open the doors for you. It's the Fath. The doors of the world will open themselves to you. When that happens and you see people entering Islam in numbers, so say Subhanallah, فَسَبِّحْ بِحَمْدِ رَبِّكَ, say Alhamdulillah, and do istighfar, إِنَّهُ كَانَ تَوَّابًا, for He is the most forgiving and the most merciful. He will turn to those who turn towards Him. That's what taba means. To turn to the ones who will turn to Him. So, even though the surah is revealed in Medina, the meanings were revealed to the Prophet Muhammad in Mecca. And he was affirmed. But the surah eventually comes at the time of the Fath. And that's why when the Prophet Muhammad enters Mecca, when he's riding that horse, what does he say? Subhanallah wa bihamdihi astaghfirullah. Subhana rabbi al-a'la wa bihamdihi astaghfirullah. Subhana rabbi al-azim wa bihamdihi astaghfirullah. When all those people became Muslims, what would he say? He would say what he's told to say in the surah. So that affirms the fact that this surah was revealed in that context. But imagine the Rasulullah was already told that Islam will survive and thrive, and you'll be given the victory over your enemies, and you'll be given the opening, the doors will open themselves to you, and you will see many people enter Islam in numbers. And when you do that, honor Allah, show gratitude, and do istighfar. And that's why, listen to this carefully, Those who truly lived Islam and implemented Islam, anytime they were able to enter large territories and reestablish security and justice in the name of Islam, when they would enter, they would recite this surah. So Salah ad-Din, for example, when he was collaborating, or Nur ad-Din, when he was collaborating and training his soldiers, one of the training was to teach them, you will not party, you will not celebrate, you will not jump up and down and high-five each other, you will not throw water on the ground, or sometimes when you're excited, to show your respect for victory, you will not do any of that. If you were to beat the Crusaders, the only thing that you're allowed to do to show your celebration is do takbir, do tasbih, do tahmeed, and do istighfar together. Do you know that? And if you look at even the Andalusian times, when the same thing, this was the ayah that they reflected on and they implemented. And that goes, can you imagine like entering a new land and you're walking with dignity and doing tasbih, takbir, istighfar and tahmeed? Ya Allah, what it means, it's so profound. You're attributing the good to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not to yourself. You're saying, I'm not here for me, I'm here for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'm not here for my personal gains, I'm here to establish what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has meant for people to worship and to connect with Him. Tamam? There's more to be said, of course, on this surah, but we have Isha coming in 5 minutes. Inshallah khair, maybe when we do another iteration, we'll complete inshallah Surah Al-Nasr, Surah Al-Masad, Surah Al-Ikhlas, Al-Falaq and Al-Nas. Those could be inshallah lumped together another lesson. But I hope today was beneficial. I hope it opens up the doors to understand these surahs, to study them a bit further, to appreciate the context, and to inshallah connect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through the Quran. Jazakumullah khair, subhanakallahumma bihamdik, nashhadu an la ilaha illa ant, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilaik, and we'll pray Isha inshallah in 4 minutes.
Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, Ar-Rahmanir Rahim, Maliki Yawmiddin. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. قل رب إما تريني ما يوعدون رب فلا تجعلني في القوم الظالمين وإنا على أن نريك ما نعدهم لقادرون ادفع بالتي هي أحسن السيئة نحن أعلم بما يصفون وقل رب أعوذ بك من همزات الشياطين وأعوذ بك رب أن يحضرون حتى إذا جاء أحدهم الموت قال رب ارجعون لعلي أعمل صالحا فيما تركت كلا إنها كلمة هو قائلها ومن ورائهم برزخ إلى يوم يبعثون فإذا نفخ في الصور فلا أنساب بينهم يومئذ ولا يتساءلون فمن ثقلت موازينه فأولئك هم المفلحون ومن خفت موازينه فأولئك الذين خسروا أنفسهم في جهنم خالدون تلفح وجوههم النار وهم فيها كالحون ألم تكن آياتي تتلى عليكم فكنتم بها تكذبون قالوا ربنا غلبت علينا شقوتنا وكنا قوما ضالين ربنا أخرجنا منها فإن عدنا فإنا ظالمون قال اخسئوا فيها ولا تكلمون إنه كان فريق من عبادي يقولون ربنا آمنا فاغفر لنا وارحمنا وأنت خير الراحمين فاتخذتموهم سخريا حتى أنسوكم ذكري وكنتم منهم تضحكون إني جزيتهم اليوم بما صبروا أنهم هم الفائزون قال كم لبثتم في الأرض عدد سنين قالوا لبثنا يوما أو بعض يوم فاسأل العادين قال إن لبثتم إلا قليلا لو أنكم كنتم تعلمون أفحسبتم أنما خلقناكم عبثا وأنكم إلينا لا ترجعون فتعالى الله الملك الحق لا إله إلا هو رب العرش الكريم ومن يدع مع الله إلها آخر لا برهان له به فإنما حسابه عند ربه إنه لا يفلح الكافرون وقل رب اغفر وارحم وأنت خير الراحمين الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين يا أيها المزمل قم الليل إلا قليلا نصفه أو ينقص منه قليلا أو زد عليه ورتل القرآن ترتيلا إنا سنلقي عليك قولا ثقيلا إن ناشئة الليل هي أشد وطئا وأقوم قيلا إن لك في النهار سبحا طويلا واذكر اسم ربك وتبتل إليه تبتيلا رب المشرق والمغرب لا إله إلا هو فاتخذه وكيلا واصبر على ما يقولون واهجرهم هجرا جميلا وذرني والمكذبين أولي النعمة ومهلهم قليلا إن لدينا أنكالا وجحيما وطعاما ذا غصة وعذابا أليما يوم ترجف الأرض والجبال وكانت الجبال كثيبا مهيلا إنا أرسلنا إليكم رسولا شاهدا عليكم كما أرسلنا إلى فرعون رسولا فعصى فرعون الرسول فأخذناه أخذا وبيلا فكيف تتقون إن كفرتم يوما يجعل الولدان شيبا السماء منفطر به كان وعده مفعولا إن هذه تذكرة فمن شاء اتخذ إلى ربه سبيلا إن ربك يعلم أنك تقوم أدنى من ثلثي الليل ونصفه وثلثه وطائفة من الذين معك والله يقدر الليل والنهار علم أن لن تحصوه فتاب عليكم فاقرؤوا ما تيسر من القرآن علم أن سيكون منكم مرضى وآخرون يضربون في الأرض يبتغون من فضل الله وآخرون يقاتلون في سبيل الله فاقرؤوا ما تيسر منه وأقيموا الصلاة وآتوا الزكاة وأقرضوا الله قرضا حسنا وما تقدموا لأنفسكم من خير تجدوه عند الله وما تقدموا لأنفسكم من خير تجدوه عند الله وما تقدموا لأنفسكم من خير تجدوه عند الله هو خيرا وأعظم أجرا واستغفروا الله إن الله غفور رحيم